Chapter 277. Qin Yining did not understand why the old servant who had accompanied her father for more than 20 years would suddenly have the intention to betray him. Chitai had just said that she should sacrifice herself for the sake of the country's stability, but now it appeared in her mind. She really wanted to know what Chitai wanted to do. "Miss, let's go quickly." Ji Yun pulled Qin Yining with one hand and Bing Tang with the other. She quickly led them to the backyard. When the men saw that Qin Yining's servant girl was actually a martial artist, they were both shocked and angry. They hurriedly waved their fists and chased after them. As they chased after them, they did not forget to threaten them. If Qin Yining hadn't experienced this kind of thing before, she would probably have been scared stiff at this moment. However, Qin Yining was very experienced at such a young age. She had negotiated peace, been hunted down, and had almost been eaten by the Empress. Therefore, the more dangerous she was, the calmer she became. Those people did not carry swords and were all dressed in commoners' clothes. Although their faces were masked, it could not hide their southern accent. It was obvious that the people who wanted to kidnap her this time were dying people. She was most worried about her father's safety now, not herself. She had an expert by her side to protect her, so her life should not be in danger. She hoped that Xiao Yuqing could do her best to protect her father. Qin Yining thought about many things in her mind, but it was only a breath's time outside. They turned into the alley and saw that there was indeed no one guarding the fence in the backyard. Ji Yun stepped forward and kicked open the gate. Qin Yining and Bing Tang hurriedly followed, and the three of them ran into a quiet alley. The 10 men behind them hurriedly chased after them. However, there were many forks in the alley, and it was convenient for Qin Yining and the other two to hide. Mu Jinghu took advantage of the fact that there was no one around to catch up with Qin Yining and asked, "Why don't you let me take action? This matter is very strange. Young Master Mu, just follow me in secret. As long as my life is not in danger, don't come out." Mu Jinghu looked at Qin Yining's bright eyes in the dark and could not help but think of a wild beast in the middle of a hunt. The hair on his back stood on end, and he thought to himself that this person was indeed a fox. He said, "All right, I'll listen to you." With that, he turned around and disappeared into the shadows. At this moment, the sound of orderly footsteps and horse hooves suddenly came from outside the alley, mixed with the sound of armor rubbing against each other. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Ji Yun and Bing Tang in disbelief. "It's the army. The only ones who can appear here must be our army." Bing Tang was dumbfounded. "Are you crazy? Why does our army want to capture us?" "Maybe they're here to capture those kidnappers." Ji Yun shielded Qin Yining and Bing Tang behind her. She leaned against the wall and quietly looked outside. What she saw caused her heart to tremble violently. The men who were chasing them just now were reporting something to the army officers who surrounded the alley. The two parties obviously knew each other. "Miss, this is bad. Those people are in cahoots. Then what should we do?" Bing Tang's voice was trembling. Qin Yining pursed his lips and thought quickly. Then he said, "I have an idea, but I'll have to trouble Bing Tang." Bing Tang swallowed his saliva and nodded without hesitation. "Miss, please tell me. I'll listen to you." "Ji Yun, take my token now and think of a way to meet Wang Yi," Qin Yining said as he took off the red bean bracelet from his wrist. There was a new red plum bracelet on the bracelet. It was the same bracelet that was around her bai's neck. Ji Yun took the bracelet and was puzzled. "Miss, do you want Wang Yi to come and rescue you?" "No, you don't have to say anything. You just have to tell him about the abnormal things that happen around me today. I feel that things aren't simple. They're not here just for me. Otherwise, why didn't these people kill me? Also, it's impossible that my father doesn't know about the mobilization of the army. There's an 80% chance that he's being held back by something. If you want to see my father and report the news, you might as well go and see Meng Shi. Besides, Chitai is my father's confidant. He should know about me very well. He knows better than anyone else that the only people related to me, other than my family, is Pang Zhishi. Therefore, they want to kidnap me this time, other than threatening my father, my family, or Pang Zhishi. No matter what, you have to tell Pang Zhishi to be mentally prepared." "I don't understand." "There's no time to explain. Hurry up and leave. Take this with you." He'll naturally trust you 100%. Tell him not to worry about my safety. I have young Master Mu secretly protecting me. My life won't be in danger. I'm here to see what the other party wants to do. You just have to ask Pang Zhishi to help pay attention to the safety of my father and my family. Okay, since Miss says so, this servant will do as you say. Jia knew that Mu Jinghu wasn't far from them. She also heard that Qin Yining seemed to have a complete plan. She carefully put away the bracelet and quickly left from the other side. Qin Yining held Bing Tang's hand and said, I'll have to trouble you. You have to share my joys and sorrows. If I knew that things would turn out like this today, I wouldn't have brought you out. Bing Tang shook her head. Although she was very nervous, she still held Qin Yining's hand and shook it. This is nothing. Qin Yining held Bing Tang's hand and hid in a crouch. There were 500 Dayan soldiers outside the alley. They searched every alley and gradually narrowed the encirclement. After hiding for the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, Qin Yining and Bing Tang hid behind a pile of firewood. Just as they stretched their necks to look outside, they suddenly felt something heavy hit their necks. Under the intense pain, their vision turned black and they lost consciousness. Qin Yining felt as if she had returned to the time when she was 7 years old. Her adoptive mother was seriously ill, and she could only rely on the medicine she picked from the mountains. She didn't get better at all. She worked every day cutting firewood, but the copper coins she earned weren't enough to feed the two of them. When she went to the medicine store to buy on credit, the store refused. The shopkeeper ordered a 16 or 17-year-old shop assistant to grab her by the collar and throw her out of the store. She and her basket fell to the ground together, and the firewood and wild vegetables she picked up spilled all over the ground. She picked up the things and used her remaining copper coins to buy 2 meat buns. The buns smelled so good. She carried the buns all the way home and deeply inhaled the white and fat meat buns. The unique alkali fragrance of the white bun skin mixed with the faint fragrance of the meat and green onions made her salivate. The soup and oil seeped out of the filling of the bun and soaked the bun skin in 2 places. She carefully pinched a piece of bun skin the size of a fingernail and put it in her mouth. It smelled so good that it directly pierced into the depths of her memory. Her body trembled slightly. How did the bun disappear? Qin Yining woke up from her daze and heard the sound of wheels turning. She completely woke up and remembered what happened just now. She realized that she was in a carriage. She didn't immediately open her eyes. Chapter 278. Duke is truly quick-witted. In this way, Qin Ming's treacherous plan has been resolved. That's right. Originally, this old man was the first to surrender. Who knew that Qin Ming would steal the opportunity? Not only did he bring the proof of his allegiance to the emperor, but he also wanted to make a great contribution to Dezhou. He's benefiting from both sides. Don't tell me that all the benefits belong to him. His plan was good. Unfortunately, this old man found out about it first. The Zhou dynasty's secret emissary negotiated with this old man several times to get rid of Pang Zhishi. It seems that Pang Zhishi isn't doing well in Dezhou. Duke is wise. That Pang Zhishi is too arrogant. His merit is too high, but he doesn't know how to tuck his tail between his legs. He can't blame others. However, Duke's wisdom is truly unparalleled. I truly admire it. This is just a small trick. First, he used this little bitch to lure Pang Zhishi here. After killing him, he will shift the blame to Qin Huaiyuan. This way, even if we surrender, Qin Huaiyuan will bear the crime of murdering Prince Zhongshan. At that time, even if he has 100 mouths, he won't be able to clear his name. This is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This old man won't have to deal with this group of people when I get to Dezhou. At the same time, it will help the Empress get rid of this little bitch. Qin Yining closed her eyes. She heard the 2 people's words clearly. She was already shocked. She didn't expect Duke and Li Mian to be such a despicable person. Also, who was the secret emissary from Dezhou that Dukan mentioned? Who wanted to kill Pang Xiao? Qin Yining thought to herself. She continued to pretend to be unconscious, but she carefully closed her eyes. She found that the carriage she was in was extremely spacious. Bing Tang was like her. His hands were tied, and he was lying at her feet. Duke and a thin man were sitting with their backs to her. There seemed to be another person tied up in the corner of the carriage that was blocked by them. Cheen Ening was just thinking this when she heard a whimper from the person in the corner. It was obvious that he had something to say. From the sound of it, it seemed to be Chi Tai. Dukin sneered, "TSK, I forgot about that. If he has something to say, let him say it." And Guogong's attendant went forward and pulled out the rag covering Chi Tai's mouth. Chi Tai took a few deep breaths and immediately asked, "Didn't you say that you wanted to use fourth mist to lure Pang Jishi over and kill that evil fetus so that the enemy would be in chaos and we wouldn't have to surrender? How dare you lie to me? Dukin, to think that you're the Duke's father-in-law. You've been thinking of surrendering for a long time. How can you face the Emperor? How can you be worthy of being a Dayan? You actually told me to trick the fourth young miss into coming out, and even wanted to kill my master. You are despicable and shameless. Huh, don't make it sound like you're loyal." And Guogong sneered, "Your master only has one daughter. No matter what the reason is, you've betrayed him by tricking his precious one out. But I never wanted to harm the Marquis. I'm doing this for the greater good of the country, for the Dayan." Ignorant, and Guogong closed his eyes and waved his hand casually. "Who put this filthy thing on the carriage? It's quite heavy for the horse to pull it. Throw it down and take its head." "Yes." The carriage slowly stopped, and the guards outside came up to drag Chi Tai out. Chi Tai cursed in horror. "Li, you'll die a horrible death. You'll die a horrible death. This old man is also cleaning up the house for your Marquis. I didn't expect that a dog that I've raised for more than 20 years would bite him back. He's really useless." The curtain of the carriage slowly lowered, and Chi Tai's cursing stopped abruptly. The carriage resumed moving. Cheen Ening closed her eyes, and her body couldn't help but tremble slightly. She tried to calm herself down and not let the other party find out that she had woken up. Once a Guogong found out that she was awake, he would suspect that she had heard a lot of their conversation. At that time, she would definitely be killed. The other party wanted to use her to lure Pang Xiao over. He might poison her, destroy her body, and let her die when he had enough. She believed that if a little girl like her could think of this, an old and cunning person like Guogong would also think of it. She could not take this risk, but now she could be sure that her father was fine for now. Before Guogong successfully tricked Pang Xiao to come and kill him, he would not reveal anything to her father. After all, her father had the reputation of Pan and the Wise. Ordinary people didn't dare to let her father know when they played tricks. They were afraid that he would infer the truth. Cheen Ening pretended to be unconscious, and her mind started to think of a countermeasure. Not long after, the carriage slowly stopped. Cheen Ening seemed to hear the sound of flags fluttering in the wind, and the sound of messy footsteps and armor rubbing against each other. She didn't dare to open her eyes to look, but she guessed that she had arrived at the military camp. Someone lifted the curtain of the carriage and respectfully asked Guogong to get off. Then someone entered the carriage and picked her up. Her nose was immediately filled with the sour smell of sweat from the unfamiliar man. The men in the military were not like them who relied on hot springs in the mountains. It was not easy to bathe in this kind of dry weather. Cheen Ening endured the discomfort and continued to pretend to be unconscious. Then she heard Guogong order, "Lock this girl up in a tent alone. She is still useful for now. You are not allowed to touch her." "Guogong, you mean?" Cheen Ening heard the excited voices of the people around her. She felt many unfriendly gazes on her. If she hadn't forced herself to relax, the vigilance she had developed over the years would have made her tense up and run away. "These bastards, are they going to suffocate to death?" And Guogong scolded jokingly. A few men beside him laughed. It seemed that these people were the trusted aides of Guogong. And Guogong probably wanted to use her and give her to these people. Wake that little girl up. Tell her to go to the other side and send a message to Mr. Yun. Tell him that if he doesn't come, I will give his beloved girl to the soldiers in the army. Send someone to keep an eye on that little girl. Don't let her play any tricks." And Guogong gradually walked away as he gave his orders. Someone brought some water and poured some ice sugar over him to wake him up. Bing Tang's hands were tied, but her mouth was still free. As soon as she woke up and understood the situation, she immediately screamed, "What are you doing? Aren't you afraid that my Marquis will punish you if he finds out? If he wants to punish you, that will depend on the future. Right now, if you don't listen to us, we will kill you first." Someone told Bing Tang what Nguagong had just said. Qin Yining, who was pretending to be unconscious, didn't know how Bing Tang responded and what expression she had. Qin Yining felt the person holding her begin to walk. Then he took her into a tent and gently put her down. The man's rough fingers that smelled of sweat and smoke lingered on her cheek. Chapter 279. Qin Yining began to feel nervous. She could endure any kind of pain, but not humiliation. The unfamiliar man's rough fingers had a thick layer of calluses, and he smelled of sweat. Qin Yining almost wanted to vomit. She suddenly opened her eyes and glared fiercely at that person. That person was looking at her face with infatuation. He felt that he had never seen such a beautiful woman in his life. He thought that since she was unconscious, it wouldn't matter if he touched her a few times. Who would have thought that she would suddenly wake up? He was startled and took 2 steps back in a panic, almost falling down in his panic. Qin Yining saw this person's expression and felt slightly relieved. She said in a low voice, "What do you want to do? Don't you know who I am?" The man in his 20s coughed awkwardly. His ears were red, and he reluctantly looked at Qin Yining one more time before he fled. As soon as he left, there was a burst of laughter outside the tent. Several people joked and said that the man had been disliked by the beauty. Another person boasted that if he or she were to go, he or she would be able to take on 2 people. Once again, everyone mocked him. Qin Yining listened to those people's vulgar words and furrowed her brows in anger. She first looked around. This was a small military tent. She was sitting on a wooden camp bed facing the door of the tent. On the square table to her right, there was a pea-sized oil lamp. Next to the oil lamp was a crock with a clay bowl. It was probably used to hold water. On the left corner of the bed was a wash basin. Although Qin Yining's hands were tied, her feet were free. She got up and blew out the oil lamp. Once it was dark inside the tent, the shadows on the tent could be seen clearly. There were 5 people guarding her tent. The shadows of these 5 people were very tall and should be less than 2 steps away from the tent. 2 of them were guarding the entrance of the tent, standing like a pole, while the other 3 were gathered on her right side, whispering to each other and occasionally snickering. Qin Yining frowned. She thought that Duke Ongwa's words had given these people hope. They thought that once they had used her enough, Duke Ongwa would give her to them. Qin Yining sneered. The matter could not be concluded until the very end, so he decided to let these people have some fun for the time being. Qin Yining lay down on his side and waited for the news from Bing Tang. At dawn, the sound of footsteps could be heard from outside the tent. Qin Yining was originally extremely tired and sleepy, but when he heard the commotion, he quickly sat up. He saw the curtain of the tent open, and a man pushed in Bing Tang, whose hands were tied behind his back, and scolded, "Behave yourself, otherwise I'll kill you." Bing Tang spat fiercely at that person before slowly walking towards Qin Yining. Qin Yining was relieved to see her come back safe and sound. The 2 of them sat side by side on the wooden bed. Bing Tang looked at the door of the tent. When he saw that no one was coming, he whispered into Qin Yining's ear, "Miss, I saw Wang Yi." Qin Yining nodded and whispered back, "Did you go directly to the Zhou's military camp? How is Ji Yun?" "I went to the military camp. Ji Yun had already arrived. Wang Yi is doing well, and his injuries have also healed. Wang Yi said that you don't have to be afraid. He has a way to resolve this matter, and he told you to stay here with peace of mind for the time being. He'll be able to get them to release you in less than a day." "That's good." Qin Yining heaved a sigh of relief and whispered, "What did you say to Duke Ongwa? Didn't Duke Ongwa arrange for someone to follow you?" Bing Tang whispered, "That person followed me to the Zhou dynasty's military camp and was captured by Wang Yi. I forced him to eat a poison pill. Only I have the antidote. He didn't expect Wang Yi to suddenly attack. After he was poisoned, he naturally listened to my orders." Qin Yining nodded. "Fortunately, you know how to use poison. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to protect yourself." "That's right." Bing Tang deeply agreed. If she didn't know how to use poison, this matter wouldn't have gone so smoothly. Since Pang Xiao told Qin Yining to wait in peace, she was completely relieved. With Pang Xiao's strategy and scheming, it shouldn't be difficult to resolve this matter. You're tired. Sleep for a while. Qin Yining whispered into Bing Tang's ear. Bing Tang was indeed tired. He laid on the inside of the wooden bed. Let's take turns to rest. I'll get up and take over for you later. No need. I rested well last night. You sleep. Bing Tang nodded. He closed his eyes and quickly fell asleep. Just like that, Qin Yining and Bing Tang peacefully stayed in the tent and took turns to rest. During this time, the person who was drugged by Bing Tang even came to deliver food. Although they were just mixed flour pancakes and salted vegetables that could kill people to eat in the army, they were still food that was hard to come by even with 1,000 gold coins. Qin Yining and Bing Tang shared a pancake and rested enough. They lay on the wooden bed and chatted in low voices. They were even more relaxed than when they were in Ninggarden. That afternoon, there was suddenly a commotion outside the tent. Qin Yining and Bing Tang looked at each other. They both sat up and listened carefully. They seemed to hear 3 cheers. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. The Yuchi-yin came? He didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse for them to come at this time. As soon as Qin Yining got out of bed, the tent's curtains were lifted from the outside. Through the tent's door, Qin Yining saw Anwagong and several soldiers from the army. They were pale and sweating profusely as they led the Yuchi-yin, who was wearing a bright yellow dragon robe, into the tent. Qin Yining could finally relax. Since they dared to do this openly, the Yuchi-yin, as the emperor, would not be accused of murdering an official's daughter. Her safety could be guaranteed. He didn't know what method Pang Xiao used to make the Yuchi-yin personally come. Greetings, Your Majesty. Qin Yining and Bing Tang knelt down and saluted. The Yuchi-yin strode into the tent. He stood at the door with his hands behind his back and looked at Qin Yining and Bing Tang kneeling in front of him. He didn't immediately ask them to get up. Qin Yining lowered his head. He felt that something was amiss. If it was the Yuchi-yin in the past, he would have asked her to get up first. Could it be that something had changed? Yuchi-yin gritted his teeth and squeezed out a sentence. Unrelated people leave. No one is allowed to come within 10 feet of the tent. Yes. Anwagong led the guards and soldiers, and even called for Bing Tang. Everyone retreated and stood at a distance. Yuchi-yin pursed his lips. After a while, he sneered. What a good method. What a charm. Tell me, should I charge you with treason? Qin Yining heard this and suddenly raised his head. He looked straight into Yuchi-yin's eyes, which were filled with anger. Yuchi-yin clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. He gritted his teeth and said, Speak. This subject's daughter has never colluded with the enemy. I don't know how to reply to Your Majesty. Qin Yining lowered his head again in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Yuchi-yin laughed with a hoarse voice and said, This is hilarious. Initially, I was thinking of beating them at their own game, taking the opportunity to eliminate the murderer Meng Jishi before surrendering, and consider it as having avenged Great Yan Dynasty. However, that boorish man actually dared to threaten this one. Chapter 280. Qin Yining didn't understand the reason for the emperor's anger. She hesitated for a moment before picking up the letter. On the envelope were the words, "To the Emperor of the Yan Dynasty." Every horizontal stroke of the character was slightly raised, and the structure of the frame was just right. It was extremely beautiful, and the strokes were as vigorous as dragons. It showed the confidence and arrogance of the person who wrote it. There was no need to ask to know that this was Pang Xiao's handwriting. Qin Yining opened the letter inside. As soon as she saw the contents of the letter, she almost laughed out loud. There were only 6 words on the letter. Send the person back at sunset. Otherwise, we will attack the city at our own risk. The signature was an arrogant swan character, and it even used Prince Zhongshuan's seal and Pang Zhao's private seal. Although it was a letter, the content was very concise. The seals used were not vague at all. A large red seal and a small private seal almost covered the entire letter. Especially the last sentence, at our own risk, it was arrogant to the bone. It also showed her disdain for the Yuchi-yin. It was no wonder that the Yuchi Yin was so angry. His face was almost swollen from the slap. If Pang Xiao attacked the city, how could the Yuchi Yin defend it? Gong had already brought all the generals and most of the civil officials to submit a letter of surrender. As long as Pang Xiao attacked the city gates would definitely be opened. At that time, the Yuchi Yin wouldn't even have a chance to surrender. Because of the current situation, Pang Xiao didn't care about his surrender at all. Whether the Yuchi Yin surrendered or not, it had no effect on whether Pang Xiao could destroy Dian. Qin Yining pursed her lips, put away the letter, and presented it with both hands. Yuchi Yin didn't want to take it and sneered, "Are you very proud? Proud? This subject's country is about to cease to exist. What is there to be proud of? On the other hand, Your Majesty, do you know what you are saying?" Since the Yuchi Yin refused to take the letter, Qin Yining simply put down his raised hand and placed the letter on the table beside him. "Your Majesty just said that you knew that this subject's daughter was kidnapped by Gong and used this subject's daughter to lure Prince Zhongshuan into a trap." Although Yuchi Yin was full of anger, he still felt a little guilty when he heard Qin Yining ask him such a question. After all, he had claimed that he was the one who liked her, but he had allowed her to be kidnapped and used as bait. Yuchi Yin did not answer. Qin Yining said, "Does Your Majesty know what Gong's scheme is? He lured Prince Zhongshuan here, so that after killing Prince Zhongshuan, he would bestow this subject's daughter to his personal guards and soldiers to play with, and then shift the blame of Prince Zhongshuan's death to my father." Yuchi Yin was shocked when he heard this. He slowly squatted down and looked at Qin Yining at the same level. Qin Yining knew that Yuchi Yin did not understand this, so he continued. "When this subject's daughter was kidnapped, she woke up as soon as she boarded the carriage. However, she pretended to be unconscious the entire time so that she could clearly hear the words of Gong and his aides. Gong had already contacted a secret envoy from Dezhou. That person promised Gong that as long as he cooperated with Dezhou's army, he could guarantee that all of the surrendered officials would be able to continue being officials after they went to Dezhou. Gong said that my father had already suppressed him in the Dian court. If Prince Zhongshuan was killed by my father, then after we surrendered, all of the officials would go to Dezhou. The emperor of the Zhou dynasty would definitely punish my father for his crimes. He planned to get rid of Prince Zhongshuan and my father's political enemies before he even set out. Your Majesty, are you aware of Gong's ingenious plan?" The last question pierced Yuchi Yan's heart. It was just like Pang Xiao's words, "You'll be responsible for the consequences." It shook his body and mind, causing him to fall to the ground. "Ha ha!" Yuchi Yin sorrowfully raised his head, crying and laughing at the same time. "These are my subjects. They're not good at defending the city, but they're good at playing politics and scheming. They even included me in their plans. How laughable, how laughable. With so many subjects like this country's demise is not unjust. Me, the ruler of a fallen country, is not unjust. Ha!" Qin Yining knelt on the ground and looked at Yuchi Yin, who was crying and laughing with his head hanging to the ground. He didn't care that his dragon robe was covered in dust. He also felt very uncomfortable. Who would be willing to go to this step? However, the Yin dynasty's chronic illness wasn't formed in a day or two. It had been corrupted by the Emperor Emeritus for decades. To be honest, even if Yuchi Yin was an emperor who worked hard to govern, the Yin dynasty would only be able to struggle at death's door for a while. Yuchi Yin really didn't have the talent in this area. He wanted to, but he was powerless. In the end, he had already done his best. Your Majesty, Qin Yining sighed. He wanted to persuade him, but he didn't know how to do so. Yuchi Yin sat in a daze for a while. Suddenly, he stood up with a grunt. He was a bit embarrassed, but he said very politely, "You can stand up. This time I thought wrongly. After knowing what Gong did, I wanted to beat him at his own game. That's why I had Grand Tutor Qin stay in the palace to talk with me." At this point, Yuchi Yin seemed to be afraid that Qin Yining would misunderstand. He quickly added, "Don't worry. Grand Tutor Qin and I have a teacher-student relationship. I won't harm him. I will definitely protect him. In the future, when I go to Dezhou, I will have to trouble you to put in a few good words for me in front of Prince Zhongshuan. Qin Yining stood in a daze. He looked at Yu Qian's fawning smile and didn't know how to react. In the end, he could only say, "Your Majesty is too polite. I won't forget that I am a citizen of the Yin dynasty. I also know that everything Your Majesty is doing is for the people of the capital, not for yourself." Yu Qian almost cried when he heard this. Yu Qian glanced at Qin Yining again. He patted the dust off his dragon robe and wiped his face. Then, he returned to his usual demeanor. He went outside and loudly ordered, "Someone, prepare the carriage." Not long after, someone rushed over with a cart pulled by a mule. There was no carriage on the cart, so it was obvious who was sitting on it. Yu Qian ordered Bing Tang, who had already been untied, and said, "Take your young miss with you." Then, he ordered a young eunuch, "You drive the carriage and send young Miss Qin to the other side." The young eunuch was so scared that he almost cried. He trembled and braced himself to accept the order. Qin Yining looked at Yu Qian in shock. She didn't expect that Yu Qian would directly send her to Pang Zhao's military camp. In the letter, Pang Zhao said that he was to send her back. What he meant was to send her back to her family Qin. He didn't ask him to do this. After thinking about it, Qin Yining understood. Yu Qian was trying to curry favor with Pang Zhao. This was simply, she didn't know what to say. Qin Yining and Bing Tang sat on the cart. The young eunuch took the whip and drove the carriage out of the city with a bitter expression. They crossed a wide open space and headed to the Zhou's military camp on the other side. Yu Qian watched as the city gates opened and closed. He watched as the cart went further and further away. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. The hatred in his eyes was finally replaced by helplessness. Then, he looked at Onghua Gong and the others who were standing on the side. Yu Qian didn't know how to deal with them. The people in the military had rebelled. If he ordered Onghua Gong to be punished now, he might even lose his life. Forget it. He had to survive first. Yu Qian could only return to the palace with the eunuch. In the Tiger Army's military camp, someone quickly reported to Pang Zhao, "Wang Yi, a mule cart is coming from the other side. There are two pretty girls sitting on it." Chapter 281. Qin Yining sat up straight and looked forward, searching for that familiar figure among the military tents and soldiers. As she got closer and closer, she could see the faces more and more clearly. She first saw the joyful faces of Huzi and Jiyun. Then she saw the man in a black battle robe who rushed out of the central military tent and suddenly stood behind Huzi. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh when she saw the usually domineering and arrogant person look so silly and overjoyed. Pang Zhao forced himself to stand still and not appear too unsteady. However, the surging emotions in his chest made his heart beat faster, as if he had been fighting on the battlefield for an entire day. No, perhaps even if he had been fighting for an entire day, he wouldn't be as excited as he was now. Seeing Qin Yining smiling like a flower, Pang Zhao felt as if someone had scratched his heart, and he also laughed. If it weren't for the fact that there were too many people around and he had to maintain the posture of commander-in-chief, he would have already rushed over. Suppressing the joy in his heart, Pang Zhao pretended to be calm and walked over to greet him. Although the surrounding Tiger Army couldn't see the difference in their commander-in-chief's behavior, Huzi, who often interacted with Pang Zhao, was already secretly laughing. "Wang Yi, you walk so fast. Wang Yi, your fists are clenched so tightly. Are you nervous or want to beat someone up?" The young eunuch driving the mule cart saw a tall man with an imposing aura coming toward him. He thought that this was most likely the evil spirit with the surname Yun, and was so scared that he almost peed on the spot. His hands and feet stiffly stopped the cart, jumped off, and knelt far away. His forehead touched the ground, and he trembled like a sieve. How could Pang Zhao have the time to look at other people? At this moment, his heart and eyes were only filled with Qin Yining. "You're here." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. He got out of the car and bowed. "Greetings, Wang Yi." Pang Zhao could not bear to see her suffer even the slightest grievance. Without waiting for her to bend her knees, he had already lifted her up and pulled her to his side. From his bosom, He took out the string of red bean bracelet with plum flower tassels tied on it and put it back on her. His big hand carefully tied the string into a beautiful and delicate little bow. Qin Yining raised his head to look at his focused expression, and his eyes gradually became moist. Pang Xiao placed her hand in his large, rough palm and admired it carefully. He patted her head lovingly and said, "Let's go. We'll talk inside." After saying that, he took Qin Yining's hand and walked towards the barracks. Seeing their prince coming back while holding the beautiful lady's hand, the brave tiger army made way for the two of them at the same time. The young lady was delicate and weak, with a pink face and peachy cheeks. The brave tiger army made way for the two of them. When they got closer, they realized that the beauty in plain clothes was actually the one who came for the peace talks. Some people still remembered that their own Wang Yi had put his hands on his hips and said, "You'll be mine sooner or later." Jing Hui also remembered the scene when Wang Yi brought them into the capital and robbed the execution ground in front of the Meridian Gate. Wang Yi was indeed a real man, a real man. What kind of woman couldn't he get? Looking at the current situation, the beauty had already submitted to Wang Yi. Good, good. Wang Yi is mighty. Wang Yi is mighty. The surrounding cheers seemed to slow down by half a beat. The soldiers clapped their hands and cheered loudly. The crowd was in high spirits. Pang Xiao didn't stop them. He even smiled and said to the deputy generals nearby, "This is your Wang Fei. You can come and pay your respects to her after the wedding." "Yes, Wang Yi." The deputy general smiled and saluted. "When the time comes, we will send a lot of money." Pang Xiao laughed heartily and pulled Qin Yining's hand into the tent. The cheers outside the tent became even louder. Qin Yining heard Huzi say from outside, "Go away, go away. Do what you need to do. Don't cause trouble here. Have you finished what Wang Yi asked you to do?" Qin Yining was so embarrassed that he wished he could find a hole to hide in. He didn't know what these people would say about the situation inside the tent. "What were you saying just now? When did I say I was going to marry you?" Qin Yining pulled back his hand and turned around, refusing to look at him. "I'll go lift the curtain." "Wait." Pang Xiao looked at her thin back and hugged her from behind. His lips landed on her earlobe, neck, and the side of her face. "If you don't marry me, who are you going to marry? I don't care. Everyone knows you're mine. You were sent here by your emperor. Even the people of the Yin dynasty won't say no." Qin Yining was trapped in Pang Xiao's arms. His lips were a bit dry and peeling. They rubbed against her delicate and sensitive skin on her ear and neck, causing her to shiver. Qin Yining's body trembled. He twisted his body and said, "Don't be like that. There are people outside. So you're saying that when there's no one around, I can do whatever I want?" Pang Xiao stared blankly for a moment before letting out a low chuckle. He blew a breath of hot air into her reddened ears, causing her to bury her face in his shoulder. Qin Yining's face was completely red. "Your mouth is getting worse. I don't want to talk to you. If you don't want to talk, then do something else. Since you said my mouth is bad, then check it for me. See if it's really bad." Pang Xiao held her shoulders and lowered his head to search for her lips. He impatiently pressed his lips against hers and sucked madly, searching for every sensitive spot on her lips. It wasn't their first kiss, but this was Pang Xiao's most passionate kiss. Qin Yining was like a drifting leaf, being tossed up and down by huge waves. She instinctively reached out her arms and wrapped them around his strong neck. Pang Xiao's soft and tender body was pressed tightly against his body that was as hard as iron. Pang Xiao's hands caressed her back, and then he held her butt and lifted her up. In order not to fall, Qin Yining could only clamp his waist with her legs. However, this posture was too shameful. She was shy, embarrassed, and scared. However, her lips were occupied, so she could only punch his shoulders with her fists and push him hard. Pang Xiao was both physically and mentally happy from being beaten by her. No matter how much her hands hurt, he refused to let go. Only when her pink lips were slightly red and swollen did he let go of her. He even pecked her 2 more times as if he was not satisfied. Qin Yining's face was bright red as she panted. She lowered her eyes and didn't look at him. She said softly, "Why aren't you letting go of me?" Her voice was sweeter and gentler than usual. With a beauty in his arms, her breath smelled like orchids. She was so shy that Pang Zhao's heart was like a monkey and his mind was like a galloping horse. He really wanted to do what he wanted to do. However, he wasn't the kind of person who fooled around. He regarded Qin Yining as a treasure, so he naturally wouldn't look down on women like most men nowadays. His respect for Qin Yining made him hold back his feelings. Okay, if you keep hugging me, something will happen. Pang Zhao placed her on his bed and didn't forget to tease her. He kissed her forehead and sat down next to her. Qin Yining silently moved a bit to the side and said, "I didn't think you would use this kind of method to let me go. Aren't you afraid the Emperor will hate you?" Chapter 282. Why would you think that? Qin Yining held Pang Zhao's large hand with heartache. Her fingertips slid over his rough palm and fingertips. Looking at the new scar on the back of his hand, her eyes flashed with pity. "I know you are in a difficult position. How can I blame you for this? No matter how high your status is, you're not the one with the highest status. There are many things that are beyond your control. Also, this year's drought is a natural disaster. You're just an ordinary person. How can you blame yourself for something that is beyond your control?" Pang Zhao looked at Qin Yining with a smile. His slanted phoenix eyes seemed to contain a pool of warm spring water. He knew that with Qin Yining's intelligence and conduct, she would definitely understand him. However, Pang Zhao couldn't help but be moved when he heard such considerate words from her mouth. "Sister Yi." Pang Zhao reached out and pulled Qin Yining into his arms. Without any lust, he kissed her forehead. "You are so good." His voice was low and pleasant, but it was slightly hoarse because he was moved. His warm breath blew into Qin Yining's ears. Qin Yining's ears were numb and hot, but she didn't want to move away. She just obediently leaned into his arms and closed her eyes to enjoy this moment of peace and tranquility. She and Pang Zhao hadn't had a chance to be together like this for a long time. They just held each other like this and didn't think about anything else. They put down all their burdens. At this time, he wasn't the Prince Zhongshuan of Dezhou, and she wasn't the daughter of the Grand Preceptor of Dian. They were just a man and a woman who loved each other. The Emperor had decided to surrender. Then they didn't need to be placed on the opposite side and didn't need to be tied down by so many worldly things. Perhaps it was because she was too relaxed. The exhaustion from not having much rest last night came back. Qin Yining was sleepy and tired. She wrapped her arms around Pang Zhao's waist and said in a muffled voice, "I will sleep for a while. I've asked someone to prepare the ingredients. I'll cook a bowl of noodles for you now. Eat your fill before you sleep. Okay?" Pang Zhao knew that Qin Yining had been starving during this period of time. Her heart ached. How could she bear to let her sleep on an empty stomach? Qin Yining shook his head and muttered, "No." His breathing gradually stabilized, and he fell into a deep sleep as he spoke. Pang Zhao lowered his head and looked at the person who could fall asleep in his arms. Looking at the shadows under her eyes and her small face with sunken cheeks, his heart ached. He carefully carried her up and laid her flat on his wooden bed. He removed her embroidered shoes and covered her with a thin blanket. Her long hair was spread out on the blue mattress, and the glossy black satin had now dimmed. Her white face appeared even paler under the contrast of the dark pillowcase. Pang Zhao looked at her with heartache. He stood by the bed in a daze until he was certain that she had fallen into a deep sleep. Then he quietly lay down on his side, one hand supporting his head, and looked at her intently. He used his finger to trace her long, shapely eyebrows from a distance. His finger brushed past her butterfly-like eyelashes, glided past her tall nose, and finally landed on her lips. This was the second time they had shared a bed. Pang Zhao stayed with her like this, looking at her until he unknowingly fell asleep. Pang Zhao was resting with his future Wang Fei in the tent. Who dared to disturb them? Not to mention disturbances. If anyone came within 10 zhang of them, they would be chased away by Huzi and Jinghuwei. It was so noisy that the people in the military camp had to avoid the main commander's tent. Mu Jinghu's request to see Pang Zhao was unsuccessful, and he could only go to eat under Huzi's arrangements. Wang Yi did not come out, and no one would call him. Huzi did not dare to go near to ask. He originally thought that Wang Yi would come out later, but who knew that there was no movement from the tent? It was not until the next morning that Wang Yi quietly came out. Huzi was not on duty last night and had just woken up. He was rubbing his sleepy eyes, but when he saw Pang Xiao tiptoe out of the tent and carefully draw the curtain, Huzi felt that every time he was in front of Qin Yining, he could see a new side of his Wang Yi. However, the two of them were only done now. Wang Yi did not have any protective feelings for the fairer sex. Even though this was what he thought, Huzi did not dare to directly ask Pang Xiao, nor did he dare to show any kind of mocking expression. Daring to tease Wang Yi, they would be severely drilled. They would not stop until they were tired to the point of vomiting blood. Pang Xiao cast a sidelong glance at Huzi, who had a serious expression on his face, until he was so nervous that his body tensed up. She then turned around and said, "Go and call Jiyun and Bing Tang over to accompany the young lady. I will go and prepare the meal." Wang Yi planned to cook in the military camp. It would not look good if so many people saw it. It would seriously affect Wang Yi's image. However, Huzi did not dare to persuade her. He could only accept the order and call Bing Tang and Jiyun over. The two maidservants also thought that something would happen between Qin Yining and Pang Xiao, who knew that Qin Yining was simply sleeping in Pang Xiao's tent. When Qin Yining woke up and got up, the two maidservants quickly helped her wash up and dress up. At this time, Pang Xiao also brought in the flatbread and 4 kinds of side dishes. Huzi followed behind her with a large pot of porridge. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining had received special training in this area when eating, so the two of them ate very elegantly. Perhaps because she was too happy to see Pang Xiao, Qin Yining's appetite was very good. She ate half a flatbread and a bowl of porridge. After the meal, Qin Yining and Pang Xiao talked about serious matters. "Before I came here, I was kidnapped by Duke Anghua." When Duke Anghua was talking, he accidentally revealed that he had connections with the Zhou's secret envoy. Secret envoy? Pang Xiao raised her eyebrows in surprise. How could there be a secret envoy? How come I, the commander-in-chief of the Southern Tiger Army, didn't know about this? Qin Yining sneered. "Do you know what the secret envoy and Duke Anghua talked about? The secret envoy wanted to kill you with a borrowed knife. He wanted to use Duke Anghua to get rid of you, and then frame my father with the crime of murdering the prince. Since there was such a person, the other party naturally wouldn't let you know. Could it be that they wanted you to take precautions early on?" Pang Xiao naturally knew that Qin Yining was right. He nodded and rubbed the bridge of his nose with his index finger. "I understand what you said. Then do you know who the mastermind behind this could be?" Pang Xiao touched her forehead with his large hand and smiled. "Silly girl, think about it. If I die in battle, who will benefit the most? Who will benefit the most because of my bad luck? If you think about it this way, it's clear who wants me dead." Qin Yining had already engraved the theory that the Ziwei Emperor's star didn't ascend the throne into his heart. The Zhou dynasty's emperor must be afraid of this calculation. And if Pang Xiao died in battle, the ones who would benefit the most would be the Zhou's new emperor and the officials who surrendered to the Zhou from Beiji. Of the two, the former was to get rid of future troubles. The latter was because of a conflict of interest. Pang Xiao's existence was equivalent to fiercely suppressing them. If these people wanted to have a chance to rise up in court, getting rid of Pang Xiao was definitely their best choice. Qin Yining saw that Pang Xiao was calm and didn't show any emotion on his face. He couldn't help but praise him in his heart. Chapter 283. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining looked at each other and immediately stood up to welcome him. Mu Jinghu's complexion looked very good. Although he had lost a lot of weight after accompanying Qin Yining on the mountain, his cultivation level was very high. After eating 2 full meals and a night of rest, he already looked very energetic. Pang Xiao smiled as he approached Mu Jinghu and patted his shoulder affectionately. "Did you have a good rest yesterday?" Mu Jinghu smiled and nodded. "Very good. Your situation here is much better than in the city. I haven't had a full meal in a long time. I had a full meal yesterday, so of course I slept well. You, on the other hand, did you sleep well last night?" Mu Jinghu was just purely curious. He couldn't help but look at Qin Yining, who was beside him. His gaze was too clean, but how could Qin Yining not understand when he looked at him like that? Qin Yining's face instantly turned red. He wished he could hide immediately. Yesterday, she had directly slept in Pang Zhao's tent. Who knew what the people outside would think? Pang Zhao naturally thought of this as well. He turned to look at Qin Yining's blushing cheeks and coughed twice. You stupid blockhead. How could you say that? Mu Jinghu was a kind person. He also felt that he had gone overboard with his words. He didn't persist on this topic and said seriously, I'm here to say goodbye to you. Now that your battle is over, there won't be any problems without me around. I'm going to look for my martial uncle. Pang Zhao and Qin Yining were shocked when they heard this. Tian Jizi was in Taitan? Qin Yining could not help but recall that Mu Jinghu had mentioned that the greedy wolf star was in Taitan. Tian Jizi had gone to Taitan. Could there be a connection between the two? Pang Zhao nodded and said, Okay, thank you for your help this time. If there's anything you need me to do in the future, just tell me. I won't refuse. What are you talking about? I lost to you this time, so it's what I should do. It's not like I helped you. Mu Jinghu was an honest person. In his eyes, Pang Zhao was not a bigwig, but an ordinary friend. Therefore, he did not flatter or ask for credit, and his attitude was very natural. The more he did not take it to heart, the more precious his sincerity was. Pang Zhao patted his shoulder and said with a smile, When are you leaving? We're planning to leave soon. Then I'll order people to prepare rations for you and give you 2 good horses. Mu Jinghu smiled and nodded. Okay. Qin Yining looked at the interaction between the two and could not help but smile. To have such a sincere friend was Pang Zhao's fortune. Percent at this time. Qin Huaiyuan was frowning slightly. He sat with his head down on the armchair next to the emperor and chatted with him. The emperor had gone to find the empress after returning to the palace yesterday. Then, there were rumors that the emperor and the empress had quarreled and that the emperor had whipped the empress. Qin Huaiyuan was not a person who would easily believe rumors. However, he had already seen through Yu Qiyan's personality. When Yu Qiyan saw the proof of allegiance, he was so angry that he could not control himself. If he was provoked by external forces, Qin Huaiyuan would not be surprised no matter what crazy things the emperor did. Qin Huaiyuan watched as Yu Qiyan rambled on, as if he had something to say to him, but could not open his mouth. Thus, he did not rush him and just listened quietly with a smile. Yu Qiyan had already talked about the local customs of Dezhou. There was nothing else to talk about. Thus, he used the action of drinking tea to hide his awkwardness. In the end, no matter how much he rambled on, he still had to politely send Qin Huaiyuan out of the palace. I've kept you company in the palace these 2 days. Perhaps I've delayed a lot of your matters. Yu Qiyan's tone was very polite. Qin Huaiyuan was very surprised. When the emperor was still in seclusion, he treated him with great courtesy. However, after stepping down from the throne, he was the ruler of a country. His status was different, so his manner was naturally different. It was rare for him to be so polite. Qin Huaiyuan quickly stood and bowed. Your Majesty, please forgive this humble subject. Grand Preceptor Qin, what are you saying? Yu Qiyan also stood and said somewhat awkwardly, This. Zhen actually has something to tell Grand Preceptor Qin. Yes, Your Majesty, please instruct me. Qin Huaiyuan lowered his eyes and cupped his hands. Yu Qiyan deliberated and said, Duke Onwei used the people around you to deceive 4th young Mississippi. He intended to use her as a hostage to lure Prince Zhongshuan into killing her. After Zhen investigated, Zhen learned that they were in contact with the people of Dezhou. Qin Huaiyuan's heart jumped when he heard this. The people around him who had enough status to deceive Qin Yining, other than Qitai, he could not think of anyone else. No wonder he had not seen Qitai for 2 days. Qin Huaiyuan said calmly, So that's how it is. Only these 4 words. Yu Qiyan was originally waiting for Qin Huaiyuan to ask. That way, he could take the opportunity to explain. Who knew that Qin Huaiyuan would only say this? How was he supposed to continue? Yu Qiyan could only cough twice to hide the embarrassment in his heart. He continued. When Zhen received the news, 4th young Miss was already in the military camp. Zhen went to see if fourth young miss was well. Because they threatened Prince Zhongshuan, Prince Zhongshuan wrote Zhen a letter. Yu Qiyin paused. In the end, he did not say what he was thinking because he was too embarrassed. He only said, Zhen felt that Prince Zhongshuan was sincere, so Zhen ordered people to send fourth young miss to Prince Zhongshuan. Zhen also knew that the two of them had a good relationship. After Dian's surrender, those of us who used to be core members of the Yan dynasty will have to go to the Zhou. When the time comes, with Prince Zhongshuan's relationship, it will be easier to do things. Qin Huayan nodded. Your Majesty is wise. From the Emperor's hesitant attitude and the way he tried to cover it up, Qin Huayan had already guessed the general situation. Moreover, the Emperor was probably involved in this matter from the beginning. Otherwise, he would not have used the excuse of chatting to detain him in the palace for 2 days. Pang Zhao's letter to the Emperor probably scared him. Qin Huayan's heart was boiling with anger. However, the matter was already in the past. Even if he pursued it, it would be useless. Although they had decided to surrender, everything had not yet begun. Yu Qiyin was still the emperor and still had the power to kill. Qin Huayan felt that there was no need to shed all pretense of cordiality with him over a matter that was already in the past. Moreover, he believed in Pang Zhao's feelings for Qin Yining. Qin Yining would have a better life if he went to Pang Zhao's side. It would be better than suffering in the mountains. However, Qin Huayan no longer had a good impression of the Yuqi family. However, he did not show his dissatisfaction. He still had his usual respectful and humble appearance. He saluted and said, Your Majesty is wise. This way of handling things is also good. Prince Zhongshuan is the sworn brother of the Zhou dynasty's emperor. Presumably, being on good terms with him is also beneficial to your Majesty. Qin Huayan did not show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. Instead, he said such understanding words. This made Yu Qiyin feel embarrassed. He attentively spoke with Qin Huayan for a while before ordering his bodyguards to escort Qin Huayan back to Ningyuan. He also asked the bodyguards to bring some food for Qin Huayan. After Qin Huayan thanked the emperor for his kindness, he immediately returned to Ningyuan to reunite with his family. Because Qin Yining had been missing for 2 days, the people on the mountain were almost crazy with worry. The Sun Clan had already cried over and over again. When they saw Qin Huayan and Chao Yuqing return, they hurriedly rushed over and anxiously said, You're finally back. Sister E is missing. Chapter 284. Sun Clan's daughter buried her face in Qin Huayan's arms, and her tears stained his clothes. That day, Chitai came back and said that you wanted to see Sister, so you asked Sister E to go to the foot of the mountain at night to see you. I thought that Chitai had been with you for so many years, so it was impossible for him to be unfaithful, so I let Sister E go. Who knows? Not only was he lost, but the people we went out to look for also found Chitai's body. He was stabbed in the neck and died. Only then did I realize that Sister E might have been kidnapped. She is such a good daughter, but I am useless as a mother. I let her suffer all day, and, in the end, I couldn't even keep an eye on her. Qin Huayan hugged Sun Clan's daughter, who was thin and bony, and said with heartache, Don't worry, don't cry. Sister E is all right. Really? You're not lying to me? Sun Clan's daughter raised her face and looked at Qin Huayan. Of course, I only have one daughter, and her safety is so important. How can I lie to you about this? Qin Huayan wiped her face with his sleeve and comforted her. Come, let's go in first, and I will tell you slowly. Sun Clan's daughter had always known Qin Huayan's character. If he said that Qin Yining was all right, then he should be all right. Only then did she realize that she had thrown herself into Qin Huayan's arms and cried in public. Her face turned red in an instant, and she hurriedly took a few steps back. Qin Huayan took Sun Clan's hand and walked in front indifferently, greeting the people on the mountain along the way. Chao Yuqing, on the other hand, lowered her head and followed the two of them upstairs. When Madame Dowager heard that Qin Huayan was back, she was very happy. She held Mammy Qin's hand and came out to greet him. My brother Meng, you are finally back. Qin Huayan smiled and went forward to salute. Mother, your son greets you. Get up, get up. I missed you so much. Old Madam grabbed Qin Huayuan's arm and sized it up. Then, she said with heartache, you've become tanned and thinner. Qin Huayuan smiled and greeted second Old Master, third Old Master, and other family members. The Sun Clan finally couldn't help but ask anxiously, Marquis, where's Sister E? Upon hearing her question, Old Madam finally remembered that Qin Yining had gone missing. Qin Huayuan went into the room with his family and told them what the Emperor had told him. Even if he had guessed the details, it was still related to the face of the country, so he didn't want to reveal it. In the end, he only said, His Majesty has decided to surrender to Dezhou. He'll be busy these days. The sound of exhaling could be heard from the room. Although everyone felt the sorrow of the fall of their country, they were all relieved. Qin Han said, Eldest uncle, His Majesty has agreed to surrender. Will the Dezhou people outside the capital withdraw? They will. Then will they slaughter everyone in the city? Second Madam was very worried. Qin Huayuan shook his head and said with a smile, The Emperor of the Zhou dynasty is a very shrewd person. He knows how to win people's hearts. I think that at this time, not only will he not slaughter the people in the city, he will also transport food as soon as possible. Everyone understood that even the retired emperor of Great Yin dynasty did not care about the life and death of his own people, and had hidden away all the silvers used to buy food. If the emperor of Great Zhou was able to provide food to his people, such a strong contrast was more than enough to give the people in the capital a good impression of the emperor of Great Zhou. These starving people didn't care about the fall of their country. They only cared about whether they could survive or not. Not to mention the commoners. Even the members of the Qin family were overjoyed. Only Old Madam's expression wasn't very good. A few days ago, she had just eaten the little rabbit that Prince Zhongshuan gave to Qin Yining. She even used all her strength to mock Qin Yining. Who would have thought that the emperor would directly send Qin Yining to Prince Zhongshuan's side? If the Dian dynasty surrendered to the Zhou dynasty, Qin Yining would very likely become Prince Zhongshuan's concubine in the future. If it was better, she might even become a side consort. She would become a noble lady in the Zhou dynasty. But what about them? They were the family of a surrendered official. Their life and death were in the hands of others. One sentence could decide their future. That is to say, Sister E is still very much liked by Prince Zhongshuan. Old Madam's voice was a bit hoarse. Han's second young mistress also looked at Qin Huayuan with her watery eyes. Obviously, she and Old Madam thought of the same thing. She now regretted her actions. She really shouldn't have urged Old Madam to eat Qin Yining's pet. That little rabbit was just like what Qin Yining said. It didn't have any meat on its body. It wasn't even enough to fill the gaps between her teeth. At that time, she only wanted to eat a little bit. She even secretly scolded Qin Yining for being pretentious. She was about to starve to death and still refused to eat that little rabbit. Who would have thought that the rabbit was a love token that Prince Zhongshuan gave to Qin Yining? And Qin Yining was going to become a Wangfei? Han's second young mistress regretted so much that her intestines turned green. Qin Huayuan saw that his old mother and niece-in-law had this kind of expression. He guessed that something must have happened that he didn't know about. He said calmly, Prince Zhongshuan likes Sister E a lot. If there are no accidents, she will become a Wangfei. Old Madam laughed dryly. That's good, that's good. In the end, it's our family's sister, E, who has the ability. In the future, we will have to rely on her. Han's second young mistress also nodded with a smile. However, that smile was stiff. Even Qin Han, who was supporting her at the side, could see some clues. It was just that Qin Han didn't ask directly. Qin Huayuan peacefully stayed on the mountain for 2 days. In these 2 days, the tiger army that was guarding the city gates had indeed withdrawn. The city gates opened wide and allowed the common people to enter and exit like before. The refugees who were struggling at death's door stumbled outside to find a way out. Many people were so hungry that they didn't have any strength left. They were rolling and crawling. At this time, not far from the city gates, a tiger army soldier shouted loudly, Your Majesty de Zhou takes pity on the disaster victims and decrees that there will be 2 meals a day. There will be kanji spots set up in front of the city gates and all over the city. Everyone can come and eat kanji. As that person's voice fell, someone rushed over with carriage. They put down a big pot, rice, firewood, and other things and started to make a fire to cook kanji. The fragrance of the rice spread far and wide. How could the day's disaster victims withstand the aroma of the food? They all rushed towards the kanji stall. Among them, there was no lack of people who were hungry and had no strength left. After being squeezed, they fell down and couldn't get up again. But in the face of hunger, who could care so much? It was good enough that they could survive. How could they care about what was under their feet? Therefore, no one heard a hoarse voice under their feet. It was more out of breath than in berating, "All of you get lost. Take your stinky feet away. Jun will kill you all. You dare to commit regicide." No one heard his voice, but countless feet stepped on his back, leaving a few more footprints on his tattered clothes, which were so dirty that the original color of his clothes couldn't be seen. He wanted to cry out in pain, but he couldn't make a sound. When he opened his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He wanted to get up, but he didn't have the strength. His vision gradually blurred. There was only one signal left in his mind, and that was pain. The pain of broken bones and tendons. The kanji stall was not far away. He stretched out his dirty arms, but in the end, he didn't get to eat a mouthful of kanji. Chapter 285. Although Qin Yining lived in the Tiger Army's barracks, he didn't have much time to meet with Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao had to take charge of the reconstruction work in the city, help the victims settle down, distribute food, maintain order, clean up and burn the corpses, arrange for the military doctor to lead the doctors in the city to take care of the epidemic, and report to the Zhou Emperor to appoint officials. All of these tasks were no less tedious than commanding the Tiger Army. Pang Xiao was so busy that his feet didn't touch the ground. Even the time he had to accompany Qin Yining to eat a meal was squeezed out. However, it was also because of his busyness that the city quickly became orderly. The Tiger Army was ordered to be stationed outside the city. Pang Xiao only brought a portion of his men into the city during the day to do official business. After discussing with the Yuqi Yin appointed Dayan officials to manage the affairs in the capital according to Pang Xiao's orders. Pang Xiao would still bring his personal guards back to the barracks before Su Shi. Pang Xiao was swift and decisive in his work. He was also famous for his fighting prowess. Soon, some Dayan officials who didn't want to listen to Pang Xiao had to admit that Pang Xiao was capable. For the sake of the people's lives, they had no choice but to listen to Pang Xiao. Of course, some of these officials were relieved because the emperor agreed to surrender, and some were willing to die to show their loyalty. Almost every day, the corpses of officials who had died for their country were carried out from various houses. Some had hanged themselves, some had taken medicine, and some had slit their throats. However, these people's actions still couldn't stop the Yuqi Yan's determination to submit to the Zhou dynasty. Although the capital was greatly damaged by this disaster, the reconstruction work was solid. After a month, there were no more refugees in the city. Some shops were reopened, and the people had the strength to live a normal life. At this time, the city was orderly. It was even more refreshed than before the Zhou attacked. At this time, it was already Li Dong. "Sister Yi, from today onwards, I'll bring you to live in the city. Your body is weak, and you'll be cold if you stay in the tent all the time." Pang Xiao draped a cotton cloak with a mink fur collar over Qin Yining's shoulders. Qin Yining had not been feeling well recently. Her body had not recovered, and she had been hungry and tired for nearly 2 months. After she came to Pang Xiao's side, once she completely let go of her tense emotions, her weakness came to her. It rained a few days ago, and the weather was cold. Qin Yining caught a cold after being exposed to the wind. She had a fever for the past few days. Pang Xiao could hear her coughing every day when she came back from work. Pang Xiao knew that he couldn't selfishly keep her in the military camp just to spend more time with her. Qin Yining smiled and said, "It's fine. I don't think I'll be as happy at your place, even if I go back." She was staying at Pang Zhao's place now. Although Pang Zhao was very busy during the day, they could still see each other every day. In any case, Pang Zhao had already made it clear that Qin Yining was his woman. There was no way she could avoid him. She might as well put down her reputation and focus on enjoying their rare chance to be together. If she went back to the city, it would not be so easy for them to see each other again. How could Pang Zhao not know what Qin Yining was thinking? He lovingly stroked her head and smiled. All right, since you want to stay with me, I'll ask them to prepare enough silver frost charcoal for you. Actually, if I let you go back, I won't feel at ease. It's better to keep you under my watch. Qin Yining covered her mouth and coughed twice. Then she slowly leaned on Pang Zhao's shoulder. At this moment, Hu Zi's anxious voice suddenly came from outside. Wang Yi, your Majesty sent someone. When Qin Yining heard this, she looked up at Pang Zhao. At this time, Emperor Zhou sent someone to see Pang Zhao. Could it be that there was a new decree? Pang Zhao narrowed his eyes and gradually guessed a few possibilities. A dark whirlpool seemed to be brewing in his phoenix eyes. However, when facing Qin Yining, he was still as gentle as ever. It's fine. I'll go take a look. You can rest here. I'll ask Ji Yun and Bing Tang to accompany you. Okay. Qin Yining nodded obediently. Her long hair slid to her chest as she nodded. Pang Zhao got up and put his arms around her neck. He leaned over and kissed her forehead. Only then did he leave. In the command tent, Pang Zhao strode in and saw a familiar person. This king was wondering who it was. It's Official Yin. I haven't seen Official Yin for a long time. Your complexion looks much better. Pang Zhao sat down on the main seat with a faint smile. He pointed to the seat next to him. Official Yin, please sit. Lian Xingjie was already afraid of Pang Zhao. When he saw him raise his arm, he became nervous. He was afraid that he would be beaten again. However, when he thought of the purpose of his visit and the fact that he had the emperor's support, he finally gathered his courage. He clasped his hands behind his back and proudly said, Prince Zhongshuan is too polite. However, as an imperial envoy, this official came with your majesty's decree. Prince Zhongshuan, please listen to the decree. When Pang Zhao heard this, his expression became serious. He stood up and saluted. Lian Xingjie proudly said, Your Majesty's decree is, this time, Prince Zhongshuan has performed a meritorious service. Zhen is very relieved. Zhen hasn't seen Pang Zhishi for a long time and misses him very much. Dian's surrender ceremony in the capital is long and tedious. If we arrange for Pang Zhishi to do it, it will waste a lot of time. How long will it take for Zhen to see him? Therefore, I'll leave this matter to you. Order Pang Zhishi to quickly return to the capital. Lian Xingjie repeated the emperor's words without missing a word. He felt more confident. He faked a smile and said, Your Majesty really treats Prince Zhongshuan well. I'm afraid that you'll be too tired from rebuilding the Yin dynasty in the capital. Therefore, I won't trouble you with the surrender ceremony. Please immediately return to the capital. Pang Zhao's expression was the same as usual. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. Your Majesty really knows how to choose the right time. Or perhaps Lian Xingjie had been hiding nearby, waiting for him to finish everything before coming out to announce the decree. Pang Zhao didn't forget that there was a secret envoy who contacted the Dian people to harm him. He had painstakingly led the army to conquer the Great Yin and worked for more than a month to restore order to the capital after the disaster. The common people were resentful, the epidemic was suppressed, and a clear division of labor was assigned to the emperor and the courtiers of the Yin dynasty from top to bottom, making these people submit to him. He put in so much effort and hardships, but when it came to the surrender ceremony, he wasn't allowed to preside over it. Accepting the surrender of the Yuqi Yin was such a big event that it would be recorded in the history books. As a soldier of Dezhou, it was an extremely honorable thing. It was an honor that he deserved after working so hard for so long. However, Your Majesty urgently summoned him back to the capital and didn't give him this honor. Although Pang Zhao knew that Your Majesty was afraid of him, he didn't expect him to be so obvious. How about it? Prince Zhongshuan, you should quickly pack up and prepare to go back. Chapter 286. Such blatant insults and threats. If someone else had said such words, Lin Xingjie would have already made a scene. However, he did not dare to have such a temper in front of Pang Xiao. He could only suppress his dissatisfaction and jealousy as he said, with a stiff expression, "If Wang Yi has the time to bicker with me, why don't you go back and prepare for your return to the capital? Your Majesty's intention is that the Tiger Army is strong and is afraid that there will be trouble in the capital of the Yin dynasty. Therefore, the Tiger Army will be temporarily stationed there. Wang Yi has always liked to keep things simple and will not disappoint your Majesty's good intentions." Lin Xingjie was already laughing mockingly when he said this. So what if you, Pang Zhishi, have outstanding military achievements? Isn't it just a single word from the emperor that can decide whether you stay or leave, or even whether you live or die? Leaving the Tiger Army in the capital was equivalent to Pang Xiao not bringing his own troops back to the capital. If Emperor Zhou made any moves that were disadvantageous to him, he would not have the ability to defend himself or counterattack. As a result, Lin Xingjie felt that his anger could be vented. Pang Zhishi was only tyrannical outside, but in front of the emperor, wasn't he as obedient as a cat? Although Pang Xiao knew that Zhou Di must be afraid of him, he did not expect that after he had just subdued Great Yin, Zhou Di would reveal his intention to kill Great Yin in such a straightforward manner. It seemed that Zhou Di's fear of him had reached the point where he didn't care about his own reputation and only wanted to suppress him. Seeing Lin Xingjie's smug face, Pang Xiao felt very sick of it. However, this was human nature. The emperor had expressed his fear of him, so how could he expect his subordinates to not have any thoughts? In the end, it was his good brother who caused this. Pang Xiao stood up and dusted his robe. Lin Xingjie was so scared that his heart skipped a beat. He took a few steps back in a panic, and his heart beat like a drum. He was afraid that Pang Xiao would kill him directly, because even if Pang Xiao really killed him, your Majesty probably wouldn't do anything to Pang Xiao. Seeing Lin Xingjie's embarrassed and fearful appearance, Pang Xiao coldly snorted. If he really killed this coward now, not only would he dirty his hands, he would also cause more trouble in the future. Thinking of this, Pang Xiao brushed past him. When Pang Xiao's figure disappeared in front of the door, Lin Xingjie finally let out a long sigh of relief and sat down to wipe his sweat. That evil fetus was finally going to leave. If he had stayed, he would have gotten a heart attack sooner or later. Pang Xiao returned to the tent. As soon as he lifted the curtain and entered, he heard Qin Yining cough a few times. He couldn't help but frown with worry. He asked Bing Tang in a low voice, "Why is your Mrs. Body still not getting better? She has taken a lot of medicine. If this is the case, how can I be at ease?" Bing Tang said, "If the Miss wants her body to fully recover, she will need to rest for at least a year." Pang Xiao frowned and sat next to Qin Yining. Qin Yining took the tea that Ji Yun brought over and took a few sips. He smiled and asked, "Does your Majesty have other orders for you? Are you going to leave here?" Pang Xiao froze when he heard this. "How did you know?" Qin Yining smiled and said, "When you just said, 'How can I be at ease?' I could tell that you wanted to leave." Seeing that the two of them were talking, Ji Yun and Bing Tang left. Pang Xiao pulled Qin Yining's hand and kissed his fingertips a few times. He then said in a dejected tone, "Your Majesty has urgently summoned me back to the capital. I'm not allowed to participate in the surrender ceremony." Qin Yining nodded in understanding. "I see. He naturally doesn't want you to be in the limelight. Since there is an imperial edict, you have to leave." "Yes," Pang Xiao said gloomily. "I really don't have a choice. I can't bear to part with you. Why don't you come with me? Although we haven't been together all the time, we still see each other every day. I can't bear to be separated suddenly." Qin Yining was amused by his rare childish tone. "How old are you? You still say such unreliable things. How can I leave with you at this time? Wouldn't that be eloping with you? A eloper is a concubine. Could it be that you, Pang Zhishi, want to use the status of a concubine to send me away?" Her tone was light and was completely joking. However, Pang Xiao was very serious. He actually sat up straight and thought carefully for a moment. Then, he said seriously, "Forget it. You are right. I will send you home later. The rest of the matter can wait until you follow your family to the capital." Qin Yining asked, "How can you be sure that my family will definitely go to the capital?" "Your Majesty means that all the Dayan officials above the 4th rank will be given preferential treatment as long as they are willing to surrender. As for a famous official like Grand Preceptor Qin, he naturally can't be allowed to stay in the old capital of the Yin dynasty. I think that after the surrender ceremony is over, the first batch of people to enter the capital will follow Yuqi Qinyin and depart together." Qin Yining sighed faintly. Even now, she still felt that the Yin dynasty being destroyed like this was truly disappointing. However, she always knew that with such an incapable ruler, destruction was inevitable. Seeing her frown, Zhao hugged her tenderly and patted her back comfortingly. "Don't worry and follow Grand Preceptor Qin back to the capital. When the time comes, I will think of a way to marry you." Qin Yining closed her eyes and nodded in his arms. Percent Pang, Xiao personally sent Qin Yining back to the Qin residence. When they reached the main street near the family Qin residence, Pang Xiao had already ordered someone to stop the car. He said, "Sister Yi, I won't stay any closer. You can go back by yourself. I will stay here and watch over you." Qin Yining asked, "Why don't you come in with me?" Pang Xiao smiled and shook his head. He didn't say anything. Qin Yining had already thought it through. Now that Qin Huaiyuan had surrendered and Pang Xiao's status was so high, he had to salute when they met. Pang Xiao didn't want to make things difficult for Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Yining put her arms around Pang Xiao's neck and took the initiative to kiss him on the cheek. "I know. Take care of yourself. We will meet again in the capital. I think it won't be long before we meet again." Pang Xiao's head was heated by her initiative. His heart beat faster. He held her in his arms and was reluctant to part with her for a long time before he reluctantly let her down from the carriage. Watching her arrive at the gate of the residence, accompanied by Ji Yun and Bing Tang, Pang Xiao lowered the curtain and ordered people to return to the barracks. As soon as Qin Yining got home, someone rushed to the Xixiao garden to report the news. Now, the servants in the residence were still the ones who had been brought to Changchu Mountain. Because Qin Yining and Master Zhong had already made preparations, although the people on the mountain had a hard time, none of them had starved to death. In Xiao Garden, when the Sun Clan heard that their daughter had returned, they didn't have time to care about the old madam. They immediately brought Mother Jean out to welcome her. The old madam's expression was very awkward, but when she thought about the general trend in the future, she still asked Mammy Qin to help her up. She went out with second madam, Miss Ba, and Qin Huaining to welcome her. When they arrived at the Chuehua Gate, the Sun Clan and Qin Yining had already entered the inner residence, laughing and chatting. The old madam smiled and said, "Io, Sister Yi is finally back. The Emperor ordered us to prepare for departure. We were wondering if you would like to come with us or go with Prince Zhongshuan." Chapter 287. The Sun Clan member said with a worried expression, "These days, your father and the Emperor have been discussing these matters. The initial time set is the day after tomorrow. However, we don't know if there will be any changes." Qin Yining asked again, "Is my father not at home? Your father was urgently summoned to the palace last night and hasn't returned yet. It's said that it involves a series of matters related to the surrender. Many things need to be discussed at length. In the end, your father is wholeheartedly thinking for the Emperor and doesn't want the Emperor to suffer losses." Qin Yining nodded in understanding. With Qin Huaiyuan's temperament, he would definitely stand on his last post. Seeing that Qin Yining only spoke to the Sun Clan member and didn't even greet her or pay attention to her, the old madam felt somewhat embarrassed. The smile that she had managed to put on gradually faded. "Sister Yi, why didn't you say a word when you saw me? Could it be that you've been living too well in a military camp these days and have forgotten all the rules? Our family Qin doesn't have a daughter who doesn't understand etiquette like you." Qin Yining smiled when he heard this. He looked gently at the old madam, but his words weren't gentle at all. "Our family Qin doesn't have a daughter who doesn't understand etiquette. Then, may I ask the old madam, is there a thief who takes without asking for permission in the family Qin?" The old madam's face darkened, and she said with dissatisfaction, I only ate one of your rabbits. You don't have to hold a grudge until now, right? Your filial piety has been eaten by a dog. What time is it now? You still kept the rabbit and refused to let me eat it. Could it be that you don't care, even if I starve to death? In terms of twisting words and forcing logic, no one would dare to claim to be first if you were ranked second. Chin Ening smiled mockingly. Could it be that I took the food for myself and refused to let you eat it? Aren't you afraid that your words will make people bitterly disappointed? Moreover, did the old madam and second young mistress ask for my opinion at that time? Taking without asking for permission is considered stealing. Do you still have reason after being a thief? Your father is such a filial person. How did he raise such an unfilial daughter like you? Chin Ening's face turned cold. Whether I'm filial or not isn't decided by the old madam's lips. When the disaster came, everyone clearly saw how I treated you. Not to mention the family Chin, even the disaster victims in Ning Garden saw it with their own eyes. But how did you treat me? The old madam is so aggressive. Could it be that you want someone to be the judge? At the mention of letting someone be the judge, old madam's face completely stiffened. Chin Ening had been with Prince Zhongshuan day and night these days. If she wanted to judge, she would naturally go to Prince Zhongshuan. Although they still had a plaque that said, Marquis Fu, the title of Marquis of Anping, was conferred by the emperor of the previous dynasty. When they went to the Great Zhou dynasty in the future, it was uncertain what their lives would be like. Their future was uncertain. And Chin Ening was definitely going to become Prince Zhongshuan's woman. No matter if she was a concubine or a secondary consort, she wanted a lifetime of glory, splendor, and wealth. Moreover, she could casually blow a pillow to Prince Zhongshuan, and it might be enough to end their lives. Thinking of this, the old madam's arrogance no longer existed. She wanted to say a few nice words, but she couldn't bring herself to do so. For a moment, she stood awkwardly in the same place, not knowing whether to advance or retreat. In the end, it was Mammy Chin who could understand her master's intentions. Seeing that the old madam was in a difficult position, she immediately knelt down in front of Chin Ening. Fourth miss, please calm down. That day's matter was completely this servant's own initiative. Fourth miss, please forgive this servant. Chin Ening's gaze softened. She respected Mammy Chin very much. Mammy Chin was not only loyal and devoted to the old madam, but she was also very sensible. Moreover, Chin Ening always remembered that Mammy Chin had helped her in the past. Her expression eased, and she supported Mammy Chin with both hands. Mammy Chin, you don't have to be like this. I originally didn't want to pursue this matter. She looked coldly at the old madam. In the future, we won't disturb each other and will each maintain their dignity. The old madam's face was gloomy. Although she was relieved that Chin Ening didn't pursue this matter, she still felt that she had lost face. Chin Ening ignored the old madam and also ignored Chin Huaining. She only nodded her head in greeting to 8th Mississippi. Then, she took the Sun Clan's hand and returned to her boudoir in the master's study. She carefully inquired about the situation in the residence these days. The Sun Clan only knew that everything was the same as before. She pulled Chin Ening's hand and asked in a low voice, Sister E, you and Prince Zhongshuan, have you made up your mind to follow Prince Zhongshuan in the future? Chin Ening's face instantly turned red. She naturally knew what her mother meant by asking this question. She coughed a few times to feel less embarrassed. Mother, don't think too much. There's nothing between him and me. However, the people outside have long seen us as a couple. If I don't stay with him, public opinion won't allow it. Upon hearing this, the Sun Clan understood. She said, Mother doesn't have any other meaning. I'm just afraid that you won't have a good life. Our family status is not what it used to be. In the past, the two of you could be considered a match. But now that the Dayan dynasty has fallen, your father is going to Dezhou. I don't even know if he will become a prisoner. I'm just afraid that you will suffer. Chin Ening obediently leaned on the Sun Clan's shoulder. She smiled and said, I know that Mother is worried about me. However, you can rest assured. The Zhou's emperor is a very shrewd person. The current situation in the Zhou dynasty doesn't allow him to mistreat the surrendered subjects. Therefore, if our family goes to the Zhou, not only will we not lose our lives, perhaps father will have more room for development. Really? The Sun clan looked hopefully at Qin Yining. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Of course, it's true. After all, the Zhou was established not long ago. At that time, the successive years of war had already emptied Beiji's treasury. The Zhou dynasty took over a mess. In addition, in the past 2 years, the north of the Zhou was harassed by the Taitan. In the south, there was also a war with us. The losses from the war were huge. If the Zhou dynasty wants to stabilize the country, it will need at least 20 years of peace and prosperity to develop the economy and recuperate. In order to develop this, it needs capable subjects and talents. The Zhou dynasty's emperor is not an incapable ruler like our retired emperor. He won't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Naturally, he will use capable subjects like my father. Moreover, he still needs the surrendered subjects of Dian to balance the power in the imperial court." The Sun clan was not stupid. If she had to think about these things on her own, she might not be able to understand. However, she could understand when Qin Yining explained it to her. "What do you mean by balance? The art of an emperor is to balance the power. The current situation in the imperial court of the Zhou consists of the trusted subordinates who followed the Zhou dynasty's emperor to conquer the world and the surrendered subjects of Beiji who surrendered to the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou emperor is in urgent need of a third team to join. Only when the three of them keep each other in check can the most stable situation be formed. My father happens to be the representative of the surrendered subjects of the Yin dynasty. Therefore, mother, you can rest assured that not only will the Zhou dynasty's emperor not mistreat our family, but he will also use my father in the short term." Hearing Qin Yining's thorough analysis of the situation, the Sun clan's heart finally calmed down. Just as she was about to speak, she heard Qin Huayuan outside the door laugh and say, "It seems that sister he has improved again. Father." Qin Yining stood up happily. The door was opened, and Qin Huayuan walked in with a smile. "I didn't expect to hear you whispering to your mother when I rarely come see you. Father, please excuse me." Qin Yining bowed to Qin Huayuan and then asked, "Father, have you seen the Lianxingjie? Did he make any other unreasonable demands?" Chapter 288. Qin Huayuan thought for a moment and realized that Qin Yining must have seen Lianxingjie in the barracks. He smiled and said, "He didn't do anything excessive this time. However, since the emperor surrendered, his position is naturally lower than Dezhou's. If he doesn't allow them to make any demands, there's no other way. However, with father's wisdom, you won't let the emperor suffer too much," Qin Yining said with a smile. "That's right." Qin Huayuan also smiled. "I heard your analysis just now. Perhaps when I go to the Great Zhou dynasty, I will have more space to fulfill my ambitions. With father's talent and wit, these aren't difficult matters. You have a lot of confidence in father. That's natural," Qin Yining said with certainty. "Father will definitely accomplish great things in Dezhou." The Sun clan watched as father and daughter chatted. Although she couldn't get a word in edgewise, the satisfaction in her heart was unprecedented. At this moment, she suddenly felt that she could already be content with her life. There was no need to hate or be jealous of Chao Yuqing. Chao Yuqing was indeed young and beautiful, but so what? No matter what, she was the one who had a daughter with Qin Huayuan. Qin Huayuan acknowledged her as his first wife. No matter how beautiful Chao Yuqing was, she was still only a concubine. During this period of time, whenever the Sun clan thought of Chao Yuqing's personal bodyguard when Qin Huayuan defended the city, she felt as if a 1,000-pound stone had been placed on her heart, making it hard for her to breathe. However, now that the family of three was reunited, the knots in her heart that couldn't be untied were suddenly untied. Percent over the next 2 days, many of the wealthy families in the capital were intensely preparing for the trip. The family Qin was naturally taken care of by second master and third master with Qin Yu and Qin Han. Qin Yining, on the other hand, met manager Zhong in private. "Don't worry, boss. I've already dealt with the matters you've assigned me. Previously, when we purchased those lands in secret, I've done a careful calculation. The total amount of fertile farmlands and paddy fields in the capital city and the surrounding areas accounted for more than 60% of the total farmlands in the surrounding areas. Together with those paddy fields and terrace farmlands we purchased outside, you're now considered as one of the top landlords in Great Yin Dynasty. Qin Yining nodded and said, "These lands are not under my name, right? Don't worry, the people I've arranged are all proper people. No matter how they investigate, they won't be able to trace it back to you." "That's good. Before we set off, let's arrange for the disaster victims in Ning Garden to be relocated to various residences. Now that there's no more fighting, this place is part of Dezhou's territory. They can earn their own living and rebuild their homes." "Yes." Master Zhong was full of admiration. They owe you a debt of gratitude for saving their lives. Now that you've arranged work for them, they'll be even more grateful to you. Qin Yining smiled and shook his head. "My original intention in doing this wasn't to make people feel grateful. Consider this an additional reward. But have you really decided to go to Dezhou?" "Of course," Master Zhong said. "The Dian dynasty has been destroyed, and the existence of the Zhao Yun agency is history. In the future, we won't need to hire prisoners to work. Those prisoners will probably be pardoned soon. Our inns and restaurants will just be ordinary inns and restaurants in the future. I'm thinking that when doing business, the bigger business opportunities will naturally be in the more prosperous cities." When Qin Yining saw Master Zhong's high-spirited appearance, he couldn't help but laugh. "Actually, with you coming along, I'll feel more at ease. How about this? You don't have to rush to set off with me. I think that the people going to Dezhou's capital from here will have to be divided into several groups. Head shopkeeper, you can stay here and make some arrangements. It won't be too late to go to the capital after you've made your arrangements. When that time comes, I'll have a firm foothold in the capital, and we'll be able to do things as we did before." Master Zhong nodded repeatedly. "I'll listen to boss." Qin Yining and Master Zhong discussed the details in detail. When they had come up with a solution for all the problems and unexpected situations that they could consider, they went their separate ways. At this time, Pang Xiao had already left with a few bodyguards. The official from Dezhou who accepted the Yu Qian's letter of surrender was the newly appointed Minister of Rights, Lin Xingjie. After a simple ceremony, the Yu Qian presented the letter of surrender. Lin Xingjie received the letter of surrender in high spirits, then immediately announced the decree of the Emperor of Dezhou. The former Emperor of Yin, Yu Qian, is conferred the title of Prince of Yin. His first wife, Lady Li, is conferred the title of Prince of Yin. He is bestowed a residence in the capital. After that, there was a series of rewards, but they were all just words. Lin Xingjie claimed that he had come in a hurry, and it wasn't convenient for him to travel all the way from Dezhou to Dian with valuables. Naturally, those rewards would have to wait for the Prince of Yin to arrive in the capital. Yu Qian's heart was filled with humiliation as he accepted the decree. He had gone from being the ruler of a country to a mere prince. His rank was even lower than Pang Xiao's. However, such was fate. With things as they were, Yu Qian had no other choice. He could only listen to whatever the people of Dezhou wanted. After the ceremony ended, Lin Xingjie gave another verbal decree. In 10 days, the families heading to the capital would depart. Everyone was ordered to be prepared. Percent Pang Xiao, who only brought Huzi and a few dozen Jinghu Wei, had already galloped through most of Dezhou and quickly arrived at the southern gate of the capital. Huzi led Pang Xiao's horse and said with a smile, "We're finally back. We've been traveling day and night for the past few days. The bumpy ride has made my bones feel like they're going to fall apart." Jinghu Wei beside him laughed. "Or did you not train enough? Why didn't I see Wang Yi complain about being tired? I heard you complaining the whole way. I don't believe that all of you are made of iron." Huzi laughed as he scolded. Suddenly, he stretched his neck to look in front of the southern gate. "Wang Yi, I think I see Marquis Ding Bei." Pang Xiao looked in the direction of Huzi's finger and saw a tall young man. He was clad in a snow-white fox fur coat. He was sitting upright on a fiery red horse. His face was expressionless as he looked in Pang Zhao's direction. The young man was even more beautiful than a woman. He had slender, sword-like eyebrows, sparkling peach blossom eyes, a high-nosed bridge, and thin lips. He looked like someone who had walked out of a painting. If one were to compare his facial features, Pang Zhao would be slightly inferior. Even if one were to compare Qin Yining with him, it could only be considered a draw. However, even though he was a handsome man whose every frown and smile was enough to move one's soul, his personality was as cold as ice, and he was not amenable to human emotions. His extraordinarily handsome face rarely had a smile. His personality was cold, and he was a man of few words. He was even more ruthless when it came to killing. He did not have much contact with Pang Zhao. However, it was the person that Pang Zhao was willing to become sworn brothers with. Pang Zhao stood in place and raised his eyebrows slightly with a smile. Why have you also returned to the capital? Chapter 289. Pang Zhao said, "It's almost done." Jizu jumped off his horse and threw the reins to his follower. He walked side by side with Pang Zhao. "Qin, did you kill him?" "No." The two entered the city and walked on the bustling streets of the capital. They did not speak for a while. They were both tall and handsome. One of them was wearing a black mink fur cloak and had an imposing aura. The other was wearing a white fox fur cloak and looked as cold as ice. They walked side by side and attracted the attention of many people in the capital. Many people recognized that the one in black was the commander of the Tiger Army, Prince Zhongshuan Pang Zhao. The one in white was the commander of the Dragon Stallion Army, Marquis Dingbei Jizu. However, because they were outside and no one knew if these two people with military power had important matters to discuss, no one came forward to disturb them. As Pang Zhao walked, he was worried about Qin Yining's health. The capital was located in the north. It was a place that Qin Yining had never been to before. She was already so cold in the south. How could she stand it here? Moreover, her body was weak, and she did not have enough qi and blood. When they parted, she was still coughing. When Pang Zhao thought about this, he could not hide the worry in his expression. Jizu saw his expression. After a long time, so long that Pang Zhao had forgotten what he had talked about with Jizu suddenly said, "It's nothing." Pang Zhao was taken aback by Chu Yang's sudden question. Jizu had already taken the reins from his follower and jumped onto his horse. "Your Majesty ordered me to set off. I'll take my leave now," Pang Zhao said in surprise. "Why are you in such a hurry?" "Yes, let's meet again next time." The corners of Jizu's lips curled up in a rare smile. Then, he cupped his hands towards Pang Zhao. Pang Zhao sighed softly and said, "All right, let's meet again next time." He also cupped his hands at Jizu. Jizu put away his smile and coldly glanced at Pang Zhao and the people around him before he turned around and left. Puzi shuddered. Marquis Dingbei's temperament hasn't changed after all these years. The way he looks at others is as if he has a grudge against you. Pang Zhao only shook his head with a smile and sighed, "Forget it. Since I'm back, let's enter the palace and meet the emperor first." He did not want to be caught by those imperial censors who had nothing better to do and accuse him of disrespecting Her Majesty. Back in the capital, Pang Zhao naturally had to tighten all his nerves to deal with the things around him. The politics of officialdom ran deep. Back then, in order to conquer the world for the Zhou dynasty, he was the one who stood up for all the bad things. In addition, he avenged his father by dismembering many people. Not to mention his fierce reputation, even the surrendered officials of the Beiji kingdom looked at him as if he had killed their father. It was impossible to guard against open knives and hidden arrows. He had to be extremely vigilant to deal with all these. Moreover, the person on the emperor's seat had always held a grudge against him. Things really happened as Pang Zhao expected. In the majestic imperial palace, a middle-aged man with a medium build and a kind face was dressed in a bright yellow emperor's robe. He helped Pang Zhao up with both hands, and his voice was full of joy. "Brother, please get up. You've been away for so long, and we haven't spoken for a long time. I missed you so much." Pang Zhao took a few steps back and stood at the bottom of the stairs. He said respectfully, "So have I. How has Your Majesty been these days?" Good, all is well. I just miss you very much. You did a great job on dying. However, things like accepting the surrender and handing over are too complicated. I don't want you to be tired anymore, so I simply asked you to come back. You won't blame me, right? Your Majesty is too polite. Pang Xiao said with a smile. I'm very happy. You know, I'm the most impatient to do these troublesome and brain-consuming things. If I have the time, I'd rather eat a few cups of good wine. Huh, you're right. Li Qiqian laughed loudly and then said, You've worked hard this time. You've been away for long enough. The elders at home miss you very much. You should be by their side, more to fulfill your filial piety. In addition, you've overworked yourself. I plan to temporarily let Zhuijin Wei, the Minister of War, act as the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army. You can rest in the capital at ease. What do you think? He was going to take back his military power. Pang Xiao lowered his eyes and bowed respectfully. Your Majesty's order is exactly what I want. I thank your Majesty for your kindness. Li Qiqian didn't seem to expect that Pang Xiao would agree so easily. He was stunned for a moment and then smiled calmly. Good, good. I'll give you 100 mu of fertile land, 100 taels of gold, and 10 beauties as concubines. You must rest well during this time. My Dezhou still depends on you. As long as your Majesty orders, I'm willing to sacrifice my life for it. Pang Xiao thanked him respectfully again. When he entered the palace, Pang Xiao was still the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army. When he left the palace, he had been stripped of his military power and handed over the commander's seal. He became an idle Wang Yi with only the title of Wang and no official position. In addition to his personal guards, there were also eunuchs who gave him rewards. At the end of the line, there were 10 beautiful women with different characteristics. Huzi frowned and whispered in Pang Xiao's ear, Wang Yi, if Fourth Miss knew that you had 10 concubines before she married you, what would she do? He really touched a sore spot. Pang Xiao was expressionless, but he couldn't get more impatient in his heart. When he returned to Prince Zhongshuan's mansion, he had people take the 10 beauties to settle down. Then he went to pay his respects to his mother, grandfather, and grandmother. While Pang Xiao was reunited with his family, he didn't know that Jiziyu, who was supposed to take his personal guards to the Taitan in the north, left the capital through the north gate. He took a big detour and went straight to the south where Dian was located. Miss, hold on to this hand warmer. Don't catch a cold again. In the spacious carriage, Ji Yun stuffed a brass hand warmer into Qin Yining's arms. Qin Yining quickly took it and put his cold hands on it. Only then did he feel much better. He smiled and said, How can I catch a cold so easily? Don't worry, I'm feeling much better now. I just didn't expect the winter in Dezhou to be so cold. It's really hard to travel in the middle of winter. 10 days ago, the county king of Dezhou led his family and the first group of officials and family members who surrendered to Dezhou on a journey to the capital of Dezhou in the north. The Yin dynasty was located in the south. Even if it snowed in the winter, it was difficult to stand on the ground. However, the closer they got to the capital, the colder the weather became. When they passed through Liang City on the border between the two countries and entered Dezhou's territory, everything was covered in snow. Pine and cypress trees stood tall in the mountains. People from the south could not adapt to such cold weather. Fortunately, Qin Yining had lived on the border for many years. He adapted better than the rest of the family. At that moment, there was a sudden commotion in front of the carriage. The carriage slowly came to a stop. Qin Yining asked curiously, What's going on? I'll go take a look. Ji Yin jumped down from the carriage. For this journey, the Yuchi Yin, concubines, and palace servants were at the back of the procession. In front of them was the procession of the Anghua Duke's Li family. Further ahead was the procession of the imperial tutors Gu family. The fourth family in front was the family Qin. In front of the family Qin, there were more than 10 other families' carriages leading the way. Ji Yun craned her neck to look ahead. Suddenly, her expression changed drastically. Amidst the white snow, a large group of masked men dressed in animal skins charged into the carriages, brandishing their swords, spears, and clubs. They chopped down anyone they saw, especially the women in the carriages and palanquins. They dragged them out, and chopped them to the ground one by one. Chapter 290. Qin Yining couldn't react in time. She didn't expect that the group that surrendered to the Dian dynasty would encounter bandits. Their journey had been very smooth. Because they were surrendered subjects, their group was only escorted by 100 people from the Tiger Army. Most of the rest of the Tiger Army had already returned to the capital 10 days ago. As a surrendered subject, the Yuchi-yin were not allowed to bring any soldiers with them. They only had a few loyal guards with them. Family Qin was in a better situation. The silver-masked spies of the retired emperor had lost their previous master. Because the new emperor brought in new ministers, they weren't placed in an important position by the new emperor. They were now employed by Qin Huaiyuan. However, they were assigned to work by Qin Huaiyuan. There were only 4 silver-masked spies accompanying them. Including Chao Yuqing, there were only 5 of them. How could they protect the entire group? Qin Yining put on her soft-soled boots. Before she could get off the carriage, bandits in front of the group brandished large swords and galloped over on horseback. There were old, weak, women, and children in the group. For a moment, screams and screams could be heard. Some people fled in all directions, while others ran wildly with the carriages. The entire group was scattered. The 3 carriages in front of Family Qin were also rushed in different directions by the bandits. Qin Yining looked through the window and saw Chao Yuqing jump into the Sun Clan's and Qin Huaiyuan's carriages. With a shake of the reins, she drove the carriage in the northwest direction. Ji Yun, who was standing in front of the carriage, had already lowered her body and narrowly avoided an arrow. "Miss, be careful." The other party was using bows and arrows. It was an indiscriminate massacre. They didn't want to rob them at all, nor did they want to leave anyone alive. In the carriage, Qin Yining hurriedly erected the square table in front of her. Qiu Lu and Bing Tang screamed and hid behind the table with Qin Yining. "Ji Yun, be careful." Qin Yining shrank her body as much as she could. She heard the continuous thud, thud, thud sounds of arrows hitting the roof and walls of the carriage. Then her hands shook and several arrows hit the upright square table. Qin Yining's eyes were about to split open. She anxiously shouted, "Ji Yun, hide! Don't worry about me." Outside the carriage, Ji Yun continuously rolled in the snow and finally hid behind a thick tree. But she was suppressed by the other party's arrows. She couldn't raise her head. Qin Yining's carriage driver was shot by a stray arrow. He was hit by a stray arrow. He Yining the horse's whip and the reins in his hands. S's Yining's horse's carriage's carriage. The carriage's horse's carriage. And the carriage's only horse's carriage zestes escape was horse des escape. The horse that was pulling the reins was also startled. It ran wildly and overturned the carriage. In the carriage, Qin Yining, Qiu Lu, and Bing Tang only felt the sky and earth spinning, and then they fell together heavily. At this time, the bandits' arrows were probably used up. They shouted and waved their clubs and soared again. Qin Yining hurriedly pushed Qiu Lu and Bing Tang. "Get out of here, quickly run." "Miss, I'm scared." Qiu Lu sobbed. "Even if you're scared, you still have to run. Don't tell me you want to stay here and wait for death." Qin Yining was the first to climb out of the overturned carriage. She met a bandit's eyes. She screamed, turned around, and ran. The burly man immediately chased after her with his sword. Bing Tang and Qiu Lu hid in the carriage, trembling. They saw that Qin Yining had lured a bandit away. They were so scared that they covered their mouths and cried silently. However, they didn't dare to delay and ran out of the carriage. Qin Yining was wearing a thick cotton-padded dress, a cotton-padded cloak with a gray mouse collar, and a pair of deerskin boots. It was quite light for her to run on her natural feet. She wasn't a delicate and weak young lady from a wealthy family. In the past, she was used to hunting and gathering herbs for a living. Although her body was damaged after she was injured, she was now running for her life in a time of crisis. Thus, she erupted with unprecedented potential. She lifted her skirt and stepped on the snow that reached her ankles, leaving the big man behind. In addition, the man in the middle chased after 2 targets that were closer to him and rushed forward to attack. This gave Qin Yining the opportunity to escape. She looked at the surrounding terrain and directly ran in the direction of the messy footprints in the snow. She ran up the mountain. The wilderness was in chaos. At this time, the 100 Tiger Army soldiers who were ordered to escort them gradually took control of the situation with the cooperation of Xiao Yong and Pang Xiao. Under the urging of Lin Xingjie, they rushed to the front of the troops, trying to capture the bandit leader alive. In front of the road, a fiery red warhorse stood upright. A handsome man wearing a snow-white fox fur coat was sitting on the horse. He looked expressionlessly at the silver-white Fergana horse that his attendant had brought over. His sword-like eyebrows gradually knitted together. It was Bai Yun, Pang Zhixi's favorite horse. How could it appear in the troops of the Dian officials who surrendered? Master Ho, let's retreat. Yes, Master Ho. The Tiger Army is not to be trifled with. Although we won't be at a disadvantage if we face them head-on, it will be easy to expose our identities. Ji Ziyu's eyes darkened. He coldly looked at the Tiger Army in front of him, who was like a ferocious tiger descending the mountain. In the end, he did not want to face them head-on. One team, stay behind. Avoid the Tiger Army and search the mountains. Try to find a family Qin people and kill them all. The rest, follow me and retreat. Ji Ziyu raised his hand and signaled. He immediately turned the horse around, took the reins of White Cloud from his attendant, and led it away. The attendants and deputy generals looked at each other. Did the Master Ho come here specifically for the family Qin? However, they had disguised themselves as bandits and randomly charged in. Who knew how many family Qin people they had killed? Corpses were strewn all over the wilderness. Fresh blood bloomed on the snowy ground. The remaining team of Dragon Stallion Army deliberately avoided the Tiger Army and followed the footprints up the mountain. When the Lin Xingjie saw that the bandits had retreated, he looked at the corpses all over the ground. There were also those who had been cut up and were crying on the ground. He was so anxious that he stomped his feet. Hurry up. How many are still alive? Oh my God. How am I going to explain this to your majesty? Hurry up and see if the county king of Yin is still alive, and the family Qin. Just as the Tiger Army was cleaning up the mess, someone had already followed the footprints up the mountain. Coincidentally, they were chasing in the direction of Qin Yining. Qin Yining did not dare to delay. She tied her skirt to her belt, hugged her cloak with both hands, and ran madly into the depths of the forest. If it was not winter and there was no snow on the ground to expose her footprints, Qin Yining was actually very confident that she could shake off her pursuers in the forest. However, the problem was that the mountain was now covered in snow. Not only would she leave footprints when she stepped on the snow, but there would also be a creaking sound. Occasionally, she would accidentally step on a branch under the snow, which would make a loud, crisp sound. Qin Yining vaguely heard the voices of two men behind her. In front, there are footsteps. Qin Yining was so scared that she almost stopped breathing. She did not care about her tiredness and rushed toward the most secluded and difficult to walk in the depths of the mountain. She was now very grateful for the experience she had when she was young. It allowed her to not be so exhausted when she was being hunted, and she did not panic when she entered the mountain. Based on her experience in the forest, she walked all the way into the dense forest. She saw that the snow on the ground in front of her was gradually thinning until there were only some ice shards left. In front of her, there was a large area that was slightly moist and emitted a faint white steam. However, there was definitely no snow on the ground. Chapter 291. Heaven never bars one's way out. With this piece of land warmed by the underground spring, she didn't have to worry about not being able to cover her tracks. Qin Yining ran along the snowy road for a while, deliberately leaving a trail of footprints in another direction. Then, she stepped on a bush and jumped onto the black soil covered with pine needles, carefully taking a few steps forward. There was a steady stream of white steam rising from the ground, warming up the soles of her feet. Qin Yining was afraid of leaving footprints, and there would be more snow if she continued forward, so she simply tucked her cloak in her belt and climbed up a thick and tall pine tree. She chose a spot with dense branches and leaves and sat down on one of the sturdy branches. As she moved, the tall canopy swayed slightly. Snow rustled down, but it melted as soon as it touched the ground. Only then did Sheen Ening dare to quietly take a few deep breaths. At this moment, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Sheen Ening hurriedly held her breath, her whole body stiffening like a piece of wood. She didn't dare to move at all, pretending that she was part of the big pine tree. Two masked bandits walked not far away, one holding a steel knife and the other holding a wooden stick as thick as a wine cup. They both lowered their heads to look at the footprints on the ground, then immediately followed the footprints that Sheen Ening had deliberately left behind. Not long after, perhaps because the footprints had been cut off, the two returned. They searched for a while on the ground covered by the warm spring, but didn't find any other footprints. Moreover, the two of them had wandered around aimlessly to investigate, and their own footprints had already destroyed the scene. For a while, there were no more clues. The two of them looked at each other and cursed. A little girl can actually run so fast. The person who spoke had a northern accent, obviously from Dezhou. The other person said, "The Marquis ordered us to find the family Qin and kill them all. I don't know if the one we're chasing is the one with the surname Qin. No matter if it is or not, since we've caught up with her, we can't let her get away so easily. I don't believe that she can really disappear. Let's keep searching. Maybe she's hiding in some tree hole." The two of them then began to search for tree holes, natural caves, and underground caves nearby. In the end, they really did find traces of a collapse in the snow not far away. Hidden under the snow was a large puddle. That puddle should be the underground warm spring. The water had a faint stench, and they did not know how deep it was. They could only see the dense fog that turned the surrounding snow into smooth ice. The two of them didn't dare to move forward, fearing that the snow under their feet would loosen and they would accidentally fall into a puddle of unknown depth. This mountain was really full of dangers. This place was already deep in the mountains and forests. Even hunters wouldn't come here to hunt. Thus, the two of them circled around this dangerous area and began to search nearby. Qin Ening was not in a hurry to leave. He continued to hide in the tree and waited for 2 hours. After confirming that the two of them had no intention of returning, he carefully slid down the tree. She didn't dare to stay here for long, so she deliberately ran into the depths of the uncultivated forest. She even broke off a branch with dead leaves hanging on it. Along the way, she paid attention to cleaning up the traces of her footsteps. In this way, she carefully ran into the mountains until the sky turned dark. Qin Ening really couldn't run anymore. She forced herself to support herself against a tree and panted heavily. Looking around, the scenery was the same. The only thing she could tell was whether she was going up or going down. The night wind in the north was bone-chilling. Once she stopped, her body would start to feel cold. Qin Ening's sweat-soaked back was blown by the wind. It was so cold that she couldn't stop shivering. She looked around and dragged her tired body to a slope against the wind by the roots of a large tree. This place was in a semi-concave state. Above her head, there was a shelter made of tree roots. Beside her, there were 2 large rocks that could provide some shelter from the cold wind. Moreover, there was no snow on the ground. Qin Ening went to look for firewood, hay, and pine needles. With trembling hands, she took out a lighter from her bosom. First, she lit the hay and pine needles. Then, she chose a dry tree branch and made a small bonfire for herself behind the large rock. Qin Ening's body had just recovered from serious illness and was extremely tired. She couldn't help but cough. However, she knew that she could only rest for a short while. If she didn't take any precautions and just stood there by a bonfire that could burn out any time, she would definitely freeze to death. Qin Ening hugged her knees and wrapped herself tightly in her cloak. After warming herself for a while, she felt that her limbs were more flexible. Then, she went to look for firewood, pine needles, and dry grass. Afterwards, she went to look for some shrubs and spent a tremendous amount of effort to remove many branches from the shrubs. Qin Ening couldn't help but smile bitterly. Compared to when she was 8 years old, when she went up the mountain, at least she had some handy tools in her hands. She didn't have to rely on her bare hands to do anything. Fortunately, She was quite experienced in dealing with these things. Qin Yining busied herself for a full 2 hours. She used the branches of the shrubs to weave a curved shelter for herself. It was big enough for her to sit in while hugging her knees. Then she started a bonfire. She dragged the shelter to the ground behind the large rock that was slightly warm from the bonfire. Then she took off her towel and an overcoat. She used these two things to wrap the snow and dry it over the fire. The snow melted and wet the overcoat and towel. Qin Yining hurriedly covered the simple shelter that she had made. It just happened to cover the shelter. Qin Yining didn't dare to delay. She immediately went to fetch snow. While the overcoat and towel were still wet, she sprinkled a layer of snow on top of them. When the snow came into contact with a wet cloth, it immediately stuck tightly and was frozen into ice by the low temperature. Qin Yining used an hour to firmly cover the shelter made of tree branches with snow. After sprinkling a layer of snow, she took out some very hot branches from the bonfire and placed them on top of the shelter. When the snow came into contact with the hot branches, it melted into water, and the water turned into ice. Slowly, it formed a very sturdy shui shelter. Qin Yining rubbed her hands that were red from the cold and were about to lose feeling. She covered her mouth and coughed a few times. She thought about how it was already late and that it was impossible for her to hunt in the mountains with her bare hands. She might as well starve for a night. She wouldn't starve to death, so she didn't think about anything else. She also gathered a lot of dry firewood and pine needles nearby. She added pine needles to the bonfire outside the cave and started a bonfire inside the shelter. Finally, Qin Yining took off her cotton-padded jacket and hung it vertically at the entrance of the cave. It was just the right size. She wrapped herself tightly with the cloak and wrapped her cotton skirt around her feet. Qin Yining faced the bonfire and hugged her knees as she leaned against a tree branch and dozed off peacefully. Although there was still wind coming in through the cracks and smoke coming from the fire inside the shelter, the smoke just happened to come out through the cracks. Even if it was a little choking, it was still better than sleeping in the open and freezing to death. Qin Yining wrapped herself in the cloak and slept lightly for a night. As her hands and feet gradually warmed up, she felt that even if she were to starve, it wouldn't be so unbearable. At night, in the mountains, danger lurked everywhere. She could faintly hear the howls of wolves in the distance. Qin Yining didn't dare to relax, but she also didn't treat herself unfairly. She had a pretty good night. When she woke up early the next morning, other than her body feeling a little sore from sleeping while sitting, everything else was fine. Chapter 292. Qin Yining analyzed a few things from the conversation of the people who chased after them yesterday. First, from their accent, he could tell that they were from Dezhou in the north. Secondly, they were ordered by a marquis to kill Qin Haodong. Third, these people stayed behind to search the mountain. If they didn't kill Qin Yining, they wouldn't be able to report back. Fourth, these people's martial arts skills were comparable to the Tiger armies. Although they couldn't win, they weren't far behind. Then there was a problem. Which army did these men, who were well organized and were as skilled as the Tiger army, belong to? Who was this marquis who gave the order to kill the family Qin people? Which other marquis in the Great Zhou dynasty had the ability to lead 200 to 300 skilled soldiers to intercept and kill them? Qin Yining didn't suspect that these people were sent by the Emperor of Zhou. The Emperor of Zhou wanted the surrendered officials of the Yin dynasty to help him balance out the two powers in the imperial court. If he didn't want the surrendered officials, he could have not persuaded them to surrender in the beginning. There was no need to send people to kill them halfway. Therefore, this assassination must have been done by a marquis with a high position and military power who deceived the Emperor of Zhou. Qin Yining already had an answer in his mind. Could it really be Marquis Dingbei, who was sworn brothers with Pang Xiao and the Emperor of Zhou? But shouldn't Marquis Dingbei be stationed at the border between the Zhou and Taitan with the Dragon Stallion army? Why would he let someone appear here at this time? If the assassins were only targeting the family Qin people, why would those fake bandits kill so many innocent people in front of the group? If it wasn't for the family Qin people, she would have overheard the conversation between the two assassins. Thousands of thoughts couldn't be sorted out in a short period of time. However, Qin Yining was sure of one thing, and that was that she had to hide well for the next few days. She couldn't leave the mountain immediately. Those assassins were ordered to come. If they didn't bring back a head, they wouldn't be able to report back. They would definitely appear again. She was alone and couldn't beat them, so she could only hide. Fortunately, she had experience in surviving in the mountains. Although it was winter and not a single blade of grass grew, Qin Yining was still confident that he could persevere. However, thinking about how Lien Xingjie must be pounding his chest and stamping his feet now, Qin Yining felt a burst of joy in his heart. The Lien Xingjie was ordered to accept the document of surrender. Since he had brought the county prince of Yin and the Dian officials back to the capital, he naturally had to take precautions. Now that such a tragedy had occurred on the road, if Emperor Zhou knew about it, he would be furious. Most importantly, Lien Xingjie would have no place to hide his old face. Lien Xingjie and Pang Xiao had always been at odds. This time, he first acted as a secret agent and used her to lure Pang Xiao into the trap. After the plan failed, he brazenly came to take away Pang Xiao's chance to enjoy the glory. Now, the Tiger Army had left him 100 men, but he still had the audacity to ask a group of bandits to rob them on the way. Moreover, so many of the surrendered officials and their families were killed. This time, even if Lien Xingjie had 10 mouths, he wouldn't be able to explain himself in front of Emperor Zhou. Since the subordinates of the Marquis had disguised themselves as bandits, they must have made it so that Emperor Zhou wouldn't be able to catch him red-handed. The scandal of Lien Xingjie not only failing in his escort mission, but also being killed by the motley crew of mountain bandits would definitely not be covered up. When Qin Yining thought of this, it was as if he had seen through the situation in front of him. He could finally release some of the depression in his heart. Once he made up his mind, he immediately went out to look for food. Without tools, he looked for suitable branches. She also found a lot of withered grass and used it to weave straw ropes to make traps to catch small animals. However, without tools, it wasn't easy to hunt in the snowy mountains in winter. Qin Yining spent a whole day looking for food. In winter, there weren't any wild vegetables or fruits to eat. If she wanted to catch birds, there was neither a net nor bait. If she wanted to rely on her simple traps to catch small animals, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens. She endured her hunger and carefully searched the woods. She didn't catch any prey, but instead found 4 corpses. The 4 people had already turned into bones. From their clothes, it could be vaguely seen that 3 of them were wearing de Zhou's military uniforms, while the other one was wearing ordinary civilian clothes. From the positions and postures of their bodies, as well as the broken arms and heads, Qin Yining was certain that this was a story of one person fighting 3 people and dying together. After so many years of chaos, there would be such tragedies everywhere. She didn't expect to see such a scene in the remote mountains. Qin Yining sighed. Fortunately, there were weapons next to these corpses. Qin Yining picked up a machete, a short sword, 2 daggers, a bundle of rope, an empty water bag, and a pouch with some unknown medicine inside. Qin Yining picked up all the useful items before continuing to look for food. Fortunately, it didn't take long for Qin Yining to find a water source. She found a small stream that hadn't frozen yet. It wasn't easy for her to catch a hibernating frog in the evening. She returned to her nest to roast and eat. It was no wonder that people in the world would use any means to fight for power and money. Only with these 2 things could one live a comfortable life. However, although this kind of life wasn't comfortable, Qin Yining was willing to endure it. Smelling the rich meat aroma of the roasted frog, Qin Yining optimistically thought, today's luck isn't bad. Who knows, I might be able to catch a wild rabbit tomorrow. At that time, I won't have to worry about starving to death. Just as she was letting her imagination run wild, she suddenly heard the crunching sound of someone stepping on the snow. Qin Yining was so scared that she almost threw the frog away. She hurriedly picked up a short sword and vigilantly looked in the direction of the sound. At this moment, a gust of wind blew past, causing the bushes to shake. A furry creature about 3 feet tall suddenly ran off into the distance. What kind of animal was that? Cheen Ening focused and stared in that direction for a while. When she didn't find any wild animals, she let out a sigh of relief. Cheen Ening thought, "Fortunately, I didn't encounter any wild wolves. Otherwise, it would have been even more dangerous." After eating a tasteless frog that didn't have much meat, Cheen Ening felt her body become much warmer. She began to lay some dry straw in her nest. At this moment, she seemed to hear a slight rustling sound. From the corner of her eye, she saw a figure scurrying past. Cheen Ening became serious this time. What kind of small animal was that? Why was his speed so fast? He was actually as agile as a leopard. Cheen Ening remained calm and collected all the weapons she had picked up. Then, she hurriedly picked up a torch that was placed over the fire. If it was a small animal, it should be afraid of fire. After standing there for a long time, the small animal didn't appear again. Cheen Ening let out a sigh of relief. She guessed that the small animal had run off into the distance. She continued to use the straw to lay down her nest. At this moment, Cheen Ening suddenly felt something behind her. She quickly turned around and saw a figure approaching her. It was a child about 7 or 8 years old. He was wearing a thick animal hide. His face was dirty and his hair was messy. At this moment, he was placing a half-burned wild rabbit next to her fire. Perhaps he didn't expect her to suddenly turn around, but the child was startled. His eyes immediately widened. Cheen Ening said in astonishment, "Hey?" Unexpectedly, before she could finish speaking, the child turned around and ran off. He was as fast as a gust of wind. Cheen Ening suddenly realized that the small animal she saw earlier was this child. Chapter 293. Porridge 1. Cheen Ening chased a few steps forward, but she was not as fast as the child. She could only watch the back of the child wearing animal skin disappear into the bushes. Even hunters would not come to this desolate mountain to hunt. How could a 7 or 8-year-old child appear here? Could there be a village nearby? Cheen Ening was puzzled, but in the blink of an eye, his attention was attracted by the wild rabbit on the ground. It was a slightly fat gray rabbit. The fur on its body had been roughly processed and roasted. However, it was obvious that the person who roasted the rabbit wasn't skilled enough. It was roasted until it was dripping with blood and its internal organs weren't cleaned. Cheen Ening guessed that it was the child's handiwork. She wondered when the child had discovered her. However, Cheen Ening was certain that the child did not harbor any hostility toward her. It was a habit she had developed over the years, so she did not detect any hostility from the child. Besides, if the child did harbor any hostility, the child would not have given her such precious food. Cheen Ening carried the rabbit and walked a little further away with a dagger. He carefully dealt with the rabbit's internal organs, cut off the burnt fur, and buried it together with the internal organs in the snow to prevent the smell of blood from attracting other wild beasts. He then used the snow to carefully wash the rabbit meat in his own hands. After burying the dirty snow again, he returned with the properly treated rabbit. Cheen Ening went to pick up some more firewood because the fire was no longer burning brightly. Now that she had a machete and a dagger, it was much more convenient for her to chop firewood. She also used a knife to cut off the wet parts of the firewood. This way, the smoke would be much less. Cheen Ening skewered the rabbit with a tree branch and carefully roasted it over the fire. Although there was no salt, the aroma of the roasted meat still caused her stomach to rumble. After starving for 2 days, she had only eaten a roasted frog with little meat. In fact, she was already very hungry. Just then, Cheen Ening heard the rustling of small animals moving in the snow. She looked up at the source of the sound and saw a small figure squatting behind the shrubs. Perhaps it was because they had just met face to face, but the child didn't run away the moment he saw her. Instead, he carefully squatted and inched forward, stretching his neck and wrinkling his dirty face. He kept twitching his little nose to sniff the aroma of the roasted rabbit. Cheen Ening couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, it's you. Did you catch this rabbit?" Cheen Ening waved at the child as he roasted the rabbit. The child seemed to be startled by her sudden voice. She blinked her big bright eyes and stared blankly at her. Qin Yining was a little puzzled. This child looked about 7 or 8 years old. You should be able to understand her, right? But living in such a deep mountain, perhaps it was a tribe that did not communicate with the outside world? What if he didn't understand her? Qin Yining used a dagger to cut off a piece of roasted meat and handed it to the child. This is for you. She was afraid that she didn't understand, so she even gestured to him. This time, the child finally understood. Like an agile little monkey, he ran over and squatted down beside Qin Yining. He carefully used his little dirty hand to grab the piece of meat on the tip of the knife. Qin Yining was startled by him. She was afraid that she would cut his hand, so she hurriedly retracted her hand. Be careful not to cut yourself. She took off the piece of meat and handed it to him. The child was originally very disappointed when she didn't give him the meat. Now that he saw her use her white, jade-like hands to feed him the roasted meat, he was as happy as a little puppy. He swallowed the meat in one bite and narrowed his big eyes. Qin Yining was amused by his funny behavior. She couldn't help but ask, "Do you live here?" The child stared at the roasted rabbit and nodded. Qin Yining was delighted when she saw this. This child could understand her. "What's your name? How old are you?" The child continued to stare at the roasted rabbit. Qin Yining used a knife to slice off the roasted meat on the surface and fed it to the child. The child ate very happily, as if he hadn't eaten for a long time. His mouth was covered in oil, and his eyes curved into crescents as he smiled. Qin Yining felt sorry for him when she saw him like this. She asked again, "Where's your family?" They're dead." This time, the child actually opened his mouth to speak. However, as soon as he spoke, Qin Yining realized that there was a problem. The child's voice was a little hoarse from not speaking for a long time. His pronunciation was also very stiff, as if speaking was an extremely difficult task for him. "Are you saying that your family is all dead?" Qin Yining fed him another piece of meat. The child nodded as he chewed. He pointed in a certain direction and then pointed at the sword next to Qin Yining's hand. Qin Yining was stunned. She thought of the 4 corpses. 3 of them were wearing Zhou dynasty military uniforms, and one of them was wearing casual clothes. It was obvious that they were all male corpses. Moreover, they had perished together while fighting one against 3. Judging from the degree of decay of the clothes, the 4 corpses had been dead for at least 3 or 4 years. Qin Yining looked at the child with pity. "Is there anyone else in your family?" The child shook his head. "Then, where do you live? How old are you this year? What's your name?" The child pointed in another direction and said awkwardly, "I live in a house. I'm 9 years old. I'm called Xiaolian." "You're called Xiaolian? Is it the Lian from Lianhua?" Qin Yining looked at the child carefully. Because the child was young and dirty, it was impossible to tell whether he was a boy or a girl just by looking at his appearance. Xiaolian nodded. "Lianhua, in the vat. There's Lianhua, my name." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. It seemed that this was a little girl. Qin Yining's hands didn't stop moving. He gave her another piece of meat. Even though the meat wasn't salted, she still enjoyed it very much. She even tried her best to express, "It's delicious. It's better than the meat I roasted." Qin Yining's heart ached when he heard this. "Do you usually roast meat by yourself?" Xiaolian nodded and pointed in the direction where Qin Yining had found the corpses. She continued, "Uncle is." Qin Yining somewhat understood. The man who had been killed by the 3 people from the Zhou dynasty was this child's only family member. Without her family, she could only eat the half-roasted prey that she had roasted herself to satisfy her hunger. Qin Yining thought of the half-roasted rabbit that Xiaolian had secretly given her earlier. She knew that this child must have been eating this kind of thing all these years. She couldn't help but stroke her head lovingly. A 9-year-old child had already lived alone in this kind of deep mountain forest for 3 or 4 years. It would have been fine if she hadn't encountered them. But since they had encountered them, she couldn't ignore them anymore. With this in mind, Qin Yining made up her mind. "Xiaolian, can you take me to your house?" Xiaolian nodded happily. She reached out her dirty little hand and grabbed Qin Yining's hand. Let's go. Qin Yining immediately smiled. She casually ate a bit of the remaining rabbit meat and broke off a rabbit leg for Xiaolian to play with. Then, she extinguished the bonfire and buried it in the snow. She took the weapons that she had collected and followed Xiaoyan into the depths of the mountain. Chapter 294. Qin Yining originally thought that his hiding place was already remote and desolate enough, but he didn't expect that Xiaoyan's hiding place was even further away. The two of them held hands as they moved forward in the darkness of the forest, where the moonlight was obscured by the shadows of the trees. Xiaoyan seemed to have long been accustomed to this kind of situation. She deliberately slowed down her pace and waited for Qin Yining. When they encountered a difficult place, she even took the initiative to pull him along as they climbed. After walking like this for almost an hour, Qin Yining saw a wooden house. The wooden house was very simple, but was also very exquisite. It used the mortise and tenon technique to place semicircular pieces of wood together. From the front, it looked like two huge wooden planks were placed together to form the shape of a human on the ground. From the side, it looked like a rectangle. It's a house. Uncle made it. Xiaoyan's dirty little face was full of pride. Qin Yining stroked her glossy and messy hair and said with a smile, "Uncle is a very smart and powerful person. He was able to take a child with him and cut wood to build a house alone. Moreover, under careful observation, the entire wooden house wasn't built with a single nail, but with mortise and tenon. For a person to be able to build such an exquisite house, it was enough to prove this person's strength and wisdom." Qin Yining pinched Xiaoyan's soft little face again. This little girl's background was probably not ordinary. Otherwise, she wouldn't have hidden alone in the depths of the mountains with such a capable person. Moreover, that person had perished together with 3 soldiers from the Zhou dynasty 4 hours away from here. Qin Yining sighed. At this time, Xiaoyan had already stepped through the snow and arrived in front of the door. She lifted the animal skin covering the door and pushed it open. She blinked her big black and bright eyes and smiled as she gestured to Qin Yining to enter the house. Qin Yining returned to his senses and immediately followed her inside. The cabin was pitch black, and in the blink of an eye, Xiaoyan had disappeared. Then, Qin Yining heard the sound of wood rubbing against each other. Qin Yining took out a match and blew it to light it up. He found Xiaoyan squatting on the ground with her hands clasped together. She was holding a sharpened wooden stick and rubbing it against the groove of another piece of wood. There was some thin hay in the groove of that piece of wood. When she rubbed against it, sparks flew and the hay immediately flickered. Xiaoyan carefully used 2 wooden sticks to pick up a handful of dry grass that was still flickering with sparks and placed it under the earthen stove that was piled with firewood. The fire immediately brightened up. Xiaoyan stood up and pointed to the bonfire on the ground. "Nuanyuan." Then, her big eyes widened because she saw the match in Qin Yining's hand. "Fire?" Qin Yining nodded. She smiled as she closed the match and handed it to Xiaoyan. "This is for you." "For me?" Xiaoyan happily took it and removed the lid. Qin Yining taught her how to light it. Xiaoyan looked as if she had received a treasure. She carefully put the match into her clothes. When she looked at Qin Yining again, her eyes were shining with joy. Qin Yining could tell that Xiaoyan really liked her. Such a pure and kind-hearted child was using her clearest heart to try her best to get in touch with this world that was not full of kindness. Perhaps she had been alone in the mountains for too long and couldn't help but give her food as a sign of goodwill when she saw her own kind. Qin Yining took Xiaoyan's hand and sat down by the bonfire. She couldn't help but feel a little fortunate that she had met Xiaoyan today. If Xiaoyan had been a person with evil intentions, she would have been in danger since she was so pure. After all, the evilness of human hearts was even greater than that of wild beasts. At this moment, Xiaoyan stood up and took out a dirty quilt from a pile of things in the corner. She carried the quilt over as if she was presenting a treasure and piled it in front of Qin Yining. Older sister, Nuanyuan. Looking at the dirty quilt and the child's bright eyes, Qin Yining's heart ached so much that she almost cried. She smiled and nodded. She unfolded the quilt and pulled Xiaoyan to sit beside her. She then covered the two of them with the quilt. Xiaoyan smiled happily and stretched out her dirty little hands to warm them over the bonfire. That night, Qin Yining had a much more comfortable time than yesterday. With this wooden house, a bonfire, a dirty quilt, and a child squeezed next to her while drooling, she slept very peacefully. She no longer had a fear that wild beasts would suddenly come and eat her. At dawn the next day, Qin Yining woke up with a cough. She felt that her cold had worsened, but it was still within a tolerable range. She sat up and discovered that although there were no windows in the house and only a door, it wasn't completely dark inside. She raised her head to look at the light source and discovered that there was a bowl-sized skylight on the roof. She looked around and didn't see Xiaoyan. She didn't know where the child had gone. However, this house was really dirty and messy. The dust on the floor was probably at least 3 inches thick. Qin Yining stood up and looked around. Although there wasn't any furniture in the wooden house, there was a Kong bed on the floor. However, the Kong bed wasn't finished. Presumably, the uncle that Xiaoyan mentioned had passed away before he finished the work. In addition to the unfinished Kong bed, Qin Yining also found a dirty bundle piled up in the corner. The bundle had been opened, and several pieces of men's clothing were scattered around. Qin Yining squatted down to examine them. She discovered that among the clothes, there was a 4th-rank military uniform from Beiji country. Beiji country's military uniform was very unique. It had a bright red round collar and narrow sleeves, a leather soft armor, and a palm-wide cowhide belt. Qin Yining's expression became serious. It seemed that the uncle that Xiaoyan mentioned was a 4th-rank military officer from Beiji country. Xiaoyan's background was definitely not simple. Qin Yining felt some admiration for this military officer who brought Xiaoyan to hide in the mountains. She didn't know how many years ago they came here, but judging from the rotten state of the corpse's clothes, he had been dead for at least 3 to 4 years. Xiaoyan was 9 years old now. In other words, when the uncle brought Xiaoyan to hide in the mountains, Xiaoyan was only 5 to 6 years old. What kind of power could make a military officer bring a 5 to 6-year-old girl to hide in the mountains, build a house, raise this child, and protect her from being hunted down? Qin Yining put away the clothes and wrapped them back into the bundle. She then tidied up the mess in the house, took out a rag, wrapped it in the snow outside, and melted it over the fire. Then, she began to clean the house. After repeating this several times and throwing away several pieces of rag, Qin Yining finally wiped the original color of the wooden floor. However, after she cleaned up the dust, she found an inconspicuous gap on the floor near the corner of the wall. She walked over in confusion and inserted a dagger into the gap to pry it open. Unexpectedly, she was able to pry open the square floorboard and find a square wooden box underneath. Qin Yining suspiciously took out the wooden box. The wooden box was extremely heavy, and she couldn't help but guess what was inside. She opened the box and saw a letter written on it. The words "to be personally opened by Jin Xian" were written on the letter. Qin Yining picked up the letter. When she saw the item underneath, she couldn't help but be surprised. It was a large seal made of jade. The most unusual thing about the seal was that there was a coiling dragon carved on it. Qin Yining picked up the seal that was the size of a man's fist. When she saw the words "Treasure of Beiji" carved on it, she was extremely shocked. This was clearly an imperial seal. It was the imperial seal of Beiji country, which had been destroyed by the Zhou 4 years ago. Chapter 295. Qin Yining's mind was full of twists and turns. After connecting all the things she had investigated about Xiaoyan, an answer was already on the verge of being revealed. Qin Yining put the imperial jade seal into the wooden box and opened the letter with the words "to Jin Xian" written on it. The content of the letter was very short, but it was very shocking. The general meaning of the letter was, "Pang Zhishi's troops are already at the city gates. I'm afraid I don't have much time left. I have committed countless sins in my life, and death is not to be regretted. I only feel sorry for Yongfu. Princess Yongfu is young and innocent. I sincerely ask Brother Liu to come and help. If he can help me, I will be deeply grateful and repay you in my next life." The signature was Zhou Weixian, with a private seal next to it. Seeing Zhou Weixian's signature, how could Qin Yining still not understand? The surname of the Beiji kingdom was Zhou. The tyrant's courtesy name was Wei Xian. Because of this courtesy name, the tyrant was ridiculed by the people behind his back. They said that his name was Xian, but he was not Xian at all. From this, it could be concluded that Xiaoyan should be Princess Yongfu. Her surname was Zhou, and her courtesy name was Xiaoyan. And the uncle who died protecting Zhou Xiaoyan should be Lu Jinxian, General Lu. Qin Yining put away the letter with a serious expression and put it back together with the imperial jade seal. She originally guessed that Xiaoyan's background was not simple, but she never expected that she was a princess of the previous dynasty. Since they met in the mountains, it was fate. Qin Yining would never leave this cute little girl in the mountains to fend for herself. The mountains were full of dangers and wild beasts. She had lived in the mountains before, so she knew how difficult it was to survive. A child who lived in the mountains by herself at the age of 5 or 6 and lived until the age of 9 was safe and sound. She ate half-cooked food all day and was hungry and full like a little savage. It was already a miracle that she was not eaten by wild beasts and did not die of illness. Qin Yining could not guarantee that Zhou Xiaoyan would be so lucky if she continued to live in the mountains. She must take her away. But the most difficult thing was her background. Zhou Xiaoyan's father was the tyrant who killed Pang Zhao's father. In order to avenge his father, Pang Zhao killed the tyrant and destroyed the extremely absurd Beiji kingdom. In the eyes of the people, he was a hero, but in Zhou Xiaoyan's eyes, he was an enemy. In Pang Zhao's eyes, Zhou Xiaoyan was also the daughter of his enemy. Moreover, Zhou Xiaoyan had the imperial jade seal of Beiji. He believed that de Zhou had been searching for this jade seal ever since the founding of the country. Qin Yining was not sure if Pang Zhao would spare Zhou Xiaoyan's life after knowing that she was the princess of Beiji's state. Even if Pang Zhao didn't kill her, what about Zhou Di? What about the others? No. Such a young child shouldn't have to bear the burden left behind by his father. Since she had met Zhou Xiaoyan, she couldn't just stand by and watch. She had to take Zhou Xiaoyan away and protect her. Even if she had to hide it from Pang Zhao, she couldn't let anyone know about her background. Just as Qin Yining was frowning and letting her imagination run wild, a rustling sound came from outside the wooden house. The door was pushed open, and Zhou Xiaoyan walked in with a bloody hair and a net of sparrows that were flapping their wings and trying to escape. Her body was dirty, and she said happily, "Sister, eat." She seemed to have found that the wooden house was clean and tidy, and the floor was unprecedentedly clean. Zhou Xiaoyan hurriedly took a few steps back and threw away the bloody prey. She even used her small feet in animal skin boots to rub the bloodstains on the floor. She smiled at Qin Yining. In the past, Uncle had taught her not to bring dirty things into the house and to keep the place clean. Even though Zhou Xiaoyan was still young at that time, and even though she didn't care about these rules all these years, when she saw the clean and tidy floor now, she still remembered what Uncle had said. Qin Yining smiled and walked to Zhou Xiaoyan. He pulled her to sit beside the fire and touched her hair that had not been washed for a long time. He smiled gently and said, "Xiaoyan, you went hunting? You're amazing." Zhou Xiaoyan was praised and smiled happily. "Sister, I'm hungry. Let's eat birds." "Okay, you stay here and keep warm. I'll go and clean up." Qin Yining got up and went to clean up the game. Zhou Xiaoyan could not stay still and followed Qin Yining out. The two walked to a place further away and dug a hole in the snow before they started to clean up the hare and sparrows. After cleaning up the internal organs and washing them with snow water, Qin Yining buried the traces with snow as usual. Only then did he carry their food back to the house. Qin Yining found a small iron pot and a small bag of coarse salt in the room. She washed the pot, put it on the fire, and boiled a pot of rabbit soup with snow water. At the same time, she skewered the sparrows and roasted them. Zhou Xiaoyan squatted beside her and stared at the food with sparkling eyes. Qin Yining asked, "Xiaoyan, do you still remember the things that happened at home in the past?" Zhou Xiaoyan was stunned when she heard this. She squinted her eyes and tried hard to remember. She slowly said, "At home, there were many people. We lived in a big house. There were older brothers and older sisters who played with me. We had candy and lotus seed porridge. We had a big yard, and there were lotus flowers in the vats. Qin Yining laughed. Do you still remember your father? Zhou Xiaolian nodded. Father. He was tall and had a beard. He pricked me with it and asked me to pull it out. Qin Yining's heart was filled with mixed feelings when he heard this. Everyone said that the tyrant of Beiji was cruel and heartless. Who would have thought that this tyrant, who had done all kinds of bad things, would actually allow his younger daughter to behave atrociously on him and pull out his beard? Qin Yining smiled and said, Xiaolian, sister will be going home in a few days. I want to take you with me. You will follow me in the future, okay? Zhou Xiaolian was stunned when she heard this. Then, large drops of tears gushed out from her eyes, leaving 2 marks on her dirty little face. Sister won't go. Sister, I won't go. Seeing that she was crying, Qin Yining hurriedly pulled her to his side and wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Don't cry. Sister doesn't want to leave you behind. It's just that I have a family too. I have father and mother at home. If I go missing, they will be sad. Follow me home. You will be my younger sister in the future. I will take care of you, okay? Zhou Xiaolian choked with sobs. Uncle said that we can't go out. There are bad people outside. Qin Yining hugged the crying little girl in his arms and said, Don't be afraid. You will follow me in the future. I will definitely protect you. Moreover, my father is a very powerful person. He will also protect you. Follow me out and change your name. Don't tell others what your father looks like. Don't tell others what your family looks like. And don't tell others what your uncle looks like. Then, no bad people will come looking for trouble with you, okay? Really? Zhou Xiaolian wiped her face with her sleeve. Her entire face was dirty like a little kitten. Her eyes were even brighter after crying. Of course. I won't lie to you. Qin Yining looked at her seriously. Chapter 296. Zhou Xiaolian bit her lips and looked at Qin Yining. She could see Qin Yining's concern and sincerity. Finally, she nodded. I'll listen to you, sister. Good. Qin Yining smiled and said, Then, you must promise to listen to me in the future. After we go out, you will stay by my side. I will teach you how to read and how to live in the outside world. You must also promise me that you won't leave me, okay? Okay. Zhou Xiaolian nodded heavily. Qin Yining thought for a while and said, Don't forget your roots. From now on, you'll be called Lian Xiaozhou, okay? Lian Xiaozhou? Zhou Xiaolian's eyes widened. Lotus seed porridge. Qin Yining didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It's the Lian with the surname Lian. If anyone asks you in the future, you can say that your surname is Lian and that your father was a hunter in the mountains. He has passed away now. I met you in the mountains by chance and took you out. Your name is Xiaozhou, which is your original surname. In fact, I just reversed your name. Lian, my surname is Lian. Father is a hunter. My name is Xiaozhou, lotus seed porridge. Lotus seed porridge is delicious, so I'll call it lotus seed porridge. Qin Yining felt that he had lost to her. This child had a deep obsession with lotus seed porridge. But since she liked it, why not call her Lian Xiaozhou? Beiji had been destroyed, so Princess Yongfu and the tyrant's favorite little princess, Zhou Xiaolian, no longer existed in the world. The heavy past was a shackle to this child. Since he had decided to start over, he would give her a name that had nothing to do with the past. It might be a good thing for her to forget those memories. Okay, then from now on, you'll be called Lian Xiaozhou. Lian as in lotus seed porridge. Zhou Xiaolian, who should now be called Lian Xiaocong, nodded her head heavily and smiled with her eyes curved. Qin Yining smiled and said, All right, let's eat first. When we're full, I'll boil some water for you to take a bath. She found a large wooden basin behind the house. It must have been specially prepared by the uncle in the past. Lian Xiaozhou chewed the moderately salty roasted sparrow and drank the rabbit's soup, nodding repeatedly. Qin Yining did not know how the child had lived all these years. Anyway, he had prepared the bath water. Once the child entered the water turned completely black. Just to wash his hair, he used 3 big wooden basins of water. Wiping his body was needless to say. In any case, Qin Yining just kept adding firewood to the stove and bringing snow back. The water in the wooden tub was dirty, so she let Lian Xiaozhou wrap her cloak around her and wait for the water to boil before continuing to wash. After tossing and turning like this until the afternoon, a fair, tender, and beautiful child was standing in front of her. Because of malnutrition, the 9-year-old child looked like she was only 7 or 8 years old. Her hair was a bit yellow, but it was very soft and smooth. Her face was white and tender, and her round cat eyes were moist and bright. When she smiled, her eyes turned into crescents. There was also a pair of small dimples on her rosy cheeks, just like Qin Yining's. If people did not know, they would probably believe that Lian Xiaozhou was Qin Yining's biological sister. Qin Yining took out a few of the uncle's unlined clothes from the cloth bundle and temporarily gave them to Lian Xiaozhou to wear. She wrapped her own jacket tightly around her and let her play in the house by herself. After that, he washed the clothes that she was originally wearing from the inside out and hung them outside the house to dry. Then, he cleaned himself up as well. By the time she was done, it was already dark. Qin Yining heated the rabbit soup, and the two of them ate together. Qin Yining used her 5 fingers as a comb and combed Lian Xiaozhou's hair. Children's hair was soft and smooth, so it was very easy to take care of. She combed Lian Xiaozhou's hair into 2 twisted braids, removed the light blue ribbon that decorated her skirt, and tied 2 beautiful bows on the ends of the braids. Lian Xiaozhou happily played with her own hair. She simply loved it so much that she could not bear to part with it. When they went to bed at night, Lian Xiaozhou snuggled into Qin Yining's arms. She hugged her and was unwilling to let go. She kept saying, "Hello, older sister. I like older sister." Qin Yining's heart softened when he heard this. He was even more determined to keep her identity a secret. He could not allow anything that could threaten her safety to happen. 2 days later, Lian Xiaozhou's clothes were completely dry. Qin Yining dressed her properly and wrapped her in a clean animal skin. Lian Xiaozhou, who was not afraid of the cold, took Qin Yining to hunt in the mountains. When Qin Yining and Lian Xiaozhou were hunting, they constantly paid attention to their surroundings to see if anyone had left any traces behind. After confirming that the pursuers were not nearby, she used the few times she went out to bring back the skeletons of the uncle and the other 3 Zhou dynasty soldiers. She buried them in the forest downwind behind the house. "Little Kanji, we should leave this place." This morning, Qin Yining solemnly said to Lian Xiaozhou, "Before we leave, I must burn everything here, including the secrets of your past. This is because I cannot let anyone have the opportunity to find out about your past." Lian Xiaozhou nodded. She did not have any objections. She had been very happy with Qin Yining these past few days. She also knew that Qin Yining was sincerely doing this for her own good. Qin Yining and Lian Xiaozhou packed up their luggage. In the end, Qin Yining burned the letter that the tyrant had written to the uncle. He used a machete to dig out the frozen soil at the corner of the wooden house. After spending a lot of effort, he dug a deep hole and buried the imperial jade seal in it. Then, he set the wooden house on fire. Lian Xiaozhou pulled Qin Yining's hand and pointed at the wooden house anxiously. "Sister, there's a fire." "Yes, don't be afraid. It's snowing heavily now. Although the fire will burn, it won't destroy the entire forest. Also, I've observed that the wind has been blowing from the northwest recently. As long as we face the wind, the fire won't burn us. Sister, you've been in the mountains for so many days. There must be people outside looking for me. The bad guys who wanted to kidnap me must have retreated by now. Sister's family will know that I'm here when they see so much smoke." Lian Xiaozhou did not understand half of what Qin Yining was saying, but she still nodded obediently. Qin Yining watched as the entire wooden house was set ablaze. Even the forest where she had buried the 4 corpses was burning. She could finally relax a little. Although she had caused a forest fire, she felt very sorry for the small animals in the mountains. However, in order to save Lian Xiaozhou's life, she had to destroy all evidence that could expose her past. This included the uncle, the 3 soldiers, the military uniforms, the letter, and the imperial jade seal. The Imperial Jade Seal could not be destroyed by fire. Qin Yining also could not carry the Imperial Jade Seal with her. If she did not need it in the future, then it might not be a bad thing to leave the Imperial Jade Seal in the mountains. If she needed it in the future, it would not be difficult to find the origin of the fire. She would be able to get the Imperial Jade Seal by digging up the wooden house. Qin Yining had already planned everything properly. After confirming that there was nothing left out, she brought Lian Xiaozhou to hide. At the same time, Pang Xiao, who had been searching in the mountains for 5 or 6 days, looked in the direction of the billowing black smoke and finally revealed a relieved smile. Chapter 297. Qin Yining hid behind a bush with Lian Xiaozhou. Listening to the crackling sounds of the burning trees, she felt an indescribable sense of fear and loneliness in her heart. Qin Yining had lived in the mountains before, so she had feelings for every blade of grass and tree in the mountains. She even felt that the grass and trees had life and intelligence. If this fire were to burn down a lot of grass and trees, who knew how many small animals would suffer? But in order to protect Lian Xiaozhou, she had no choice but to do this. Holding Lian Xiaozhou's warm little hand tightly, Qin Yining began to understand Pang Xiao's many difficulties. In order to protect this child, she set fire to the mountain, but she still felt uneasy. When Pang Xiao fought and killed for the peace of the world, for the future of the majority of people, she probably felt even worse than she did, right? Just as she was thinking about this, Qin Yining suddenly heard the sound of whistling arrows piercing through the air from afar. She hurriedly stood up. Before she could react, whistling arrows responded from more than a dozen directions around her. Qin Yining guessed that these should be search and rescue teams coming into the mountains, but she didn't expect there to be so many search teams. Perhaps it was because she had never seen so many whistling arrows suddenly sounding from afar, so Lian Xiaozhou was quite frightened. Her little hand clutched Qin Yining's sleeve tightly, and she nervously called out to her sister. Qin Yining stroked her head to comfort her, and said with a smile, "Don't be afraid. These are people looking for us. They're here to bring sister home." Lian Xiaozhou didn't quite understand, so she said, "Sister's home? Someone's here?" "Yes, so you don't have to be afraid." "I'm not afraid." Lian Xiaozhou nodded heavily, but she didn't loosen her grip on Qin Yining's sleeve at all. Obviously, she was still very scared. In fact, Qin Yining was also a little nervous. She was also afraid that the pursuers hadn't all left yet, and she would attract the fire. Not long after, Qin Yining and Lian Xiaozhou heard footsteps approaching them at the same time. The sound of footsteps on the snow and dried branches was very crisp, as if they were directly stepping on their hearts. The two of them held their breaths and hid behind the bushes, not daring to come out. Through the gaps between the branches and leaves, Qin Yining saw that the leader was a skinny young man with a slightly hunched back. This man was actually wearing the uniform of the Tiger Army. The 10 or so people following behind him were all dressed as Tiger Army soldiers. How could this be? The Tiger Army had already been ordered to return to the capital of the Zhou dynasty. How could they appear in the mountains? Could it be that Pang Xiao knew that the surrendered minister's troops were attacked on the way, so he came here specifically? Just as Qin Yining's heart was in turmoil, the leader of the group shouted in a hoarse voice, "The Tiger Army is here on Prince Zhongshuan's orders to look for heir-by." He repeated this sentence 10 times. The soldier next to him took his place and shouted another 10 times. Then, the next person took his place. One by one, the Tiger Army searched and shouted at the top of their lungs. Qin Yining finally felt relieved. His heart was full of joy and gratitude. He didn't expect that Pang Xiao would send the Tiger Army to look for her. He was afraid that she wouldn't recognize him, so he used this kind of secret signal. Qin Yining pulled Lian Xiaozhou's hand and left the bushes. As soon as she moved, the searching soldiers immediately noticed her and hurriedly turned to look at her. The leader of the group immediately came forward and bowed. "You're Miss Qin?" The young man's facial features were very ordinary, but his eyes were very sharp. When he looked at Qin Yining, he was sizing her up and scrutinizing her. However, Qin Yining didn't sense any hostility. "That's me. Where's Wang Yi?" Qin Yining hugged Lien Xiaozhou's shoulder and patted her comfortingly. The young man glanced at Lien Xiaozhou again. Then, he bowed and said respectfully, "Miss Qin, please come with us." As he spoke, he instructed the person next to him, "Fire the whistling arrow." That person immediately fired another whistling arrow. Not long after, the sound of a whistling arrow could be heard from the northeast, far away from here. The young man smiled and said, "Miss Qin, please." Qin Yining was puzzled, but he didn't show it on his face and nodded. With the protection of the 10 people around them, Qin Yining and Lien Xiaozhou didn't have to worry about being attacked by wild beasts, let alone being ambushed by pursuing soldiers. Therefore, their journey was very smooth. When they reached the foot of the mountain, the young lieutenant looked into the distance and pointed in the direction of smoke rising from behind the mountain. He smiled and said, "Miss Qin, please come with me. It seems that the search team has already gathered there." Qin Yining nodded and asked in puzzlement, "Why didn't Wang Yi personally come to find me?" The young man looked around and said in a low voice, "After Wang Yi returned to the capital, Your Majesty empathized with Wang Yi's hard work and granted Wang Yi 100 mu of fertile land, 100 taels of gold, 10 beautiful women, and gave him a month's leave. He also ordered Wang Yi to hand over the Tiger Army's Tiger Tally. The current commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army is Zhou Jinwei, official Zhou." When Qin Yining heard this, he stopped in his tracks and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty stripped Wang Yi of his military power?" When the 10 or so Tiger Army soldiers saw that the two of them had something to say, they retreated 10 or so steps and followed them from a distance. The young man nodded solemnly. After the birds are gone, the bow is put away. Qin Yining pursed his lips and said with a frown, "Then why did the Tiger Army come here this time? I remember that the Tiger Army has already returned to the capital. If there aren't any accidents, they should already be in the capital at this time. Did Your Majesty order the Tiger Army to come here?" The young man shook his head. "It wasn't Your Majesty's order. It was Wang Yi who privately mobilized his troops to come here in search of a spy. Heavens, he's crazy. They were already afraid of him to begin with. Privately mobilizing his troops is the same as giving someone else something to use against him. What about Wang Yi? Where is he now?" The young man looked at Qin Yining with a different gaze than before. It seemed that the woman Wang Yi had his eyes on wasn't an idiot. Miss Qin is right. In fact, Wang Yi was originally resting at home. When he heard that Marquis North Dingbei had suddenly brought people to attack the officials of the Yin dynasty who had surrendered to the Zhou, he was extremely anxious. However, he had no one else he could use, so he claimed that he was sick. In reality, he personally dispatched people from the army to search for you and your family. Although the Tiger Army's commander seal was in the hands of official Zhou, all the brothers in the army were only convinced by Wang Yi. Wang Yi only said one sentence, and everyone followed him. The Tiger Army had a total of 100,000 soldiers. Wang Yi brought 20,000 of them. Official Zhou was afraid that he wouldn't be able to report back to Your Majesty, so he hurriedly followed him. When he left the capital, officials wrote a letter to accuse Wang Yi of secretly mobilizing his troops with the intention of rebelling. This letter was stopped by Wang Yi's people. A few days ago, officials was sent another letter to accuse Wang Yi, but this letter was also stopped by our people. However, because Wang Yi secretly mobilized his troops, if it was exposed, it would be no different from rebelling. Therefore, Wang Yi has been hiding his tracks along the way. He didn't meet officials so officials didn't have any direct evidence. Therefore, when Miss Qin sees officials later, please be careful not to let your mouth slip. His Highness led his men to rush here day and night. They searched the area for 5 or 6 days, but they didn't find you. Instead, they found a lot of other people who were scattered around. When they found that there was a big fire in the mountains, Wang Yi said that you must be here, so he ordered our team to look for you. During this time, he contacted us with a whistling arrow and confirmed that we had found you. Wang Yi didn't have time to meet you, so he quickly rushed back. This time, Wang Yi claimed to be seriously ill and closed his door to deceive others. Although officials' letter was intercepted, Your Majesty might have found out about this through other channels. If Your Majesty wanted to expose Wang Yi, then the reason of his serious illness wouldn't be able to stop Your Majesty. Wang Yi was worried that Your Majesty would search the mansion, so he hurried back. At this point, the young man looked at Qin Yining with a bit of resentment. He almost pointed at Qin Yining's nose and scolded him for being a femme fatale. Qin Yining's face was also a bit hot. It wasn't because he was ashamed, but more because he was touched. She knew that Pang Xiao had always liked her. When he was with her, Pang Xiao would change his cold and distant attitude to others. Instead, he would be as passionate as a ball of fire. He had never avoided his feelings for her, but Qin Yining didn't expect him to care about her to this extent. It was to the extent that in order to find her, he was willing to bear the charges of disobeying the imperial edict and plotting a rebellion to bring soldiers to find her. She really didn't expect that Pang Xiao would do so much to find her. He had been stripped of his military power and was already in a difficult situation. Now, in order to find her, he had dug a deeper hole for himself and jumped into it. How could he do so much for her? He was so affectionate that she felt that if she didn't burn herself in this relationship, she wouldn't be able to face Pang Xiao's sacrifice for her. Qin Yining pursed his lips and took a few deep breaths to calm the agitation in his heart. He said seriously, "May I ask who this young general is by Wang Ye's side? From the way you speak, you don't seem like a deputy general. It's not a waste of your talent to be Wang Ye's strategist." The young man was stunned when he heard this. Then he smiled and said, "Miss Qin has good eyes." This time, his voice didn't sound like a young man's. It was clearly a hoarse old man. "This old man is Xie Yu, and my courtesy name is Han Chong. I'm Wang Ye's strategist and have been by Wang Ye's side for 5 years. As I'm good at scheming and disguising, Wang Yi brought this old man out this time. Wang Yi was worried that others wouldn't be able to explain it to you clearly and cause you to misunderstand. He was also afraid that some things in Dezhou wouldn't be explained clearly to others, so he specially instructed this old man to follow Miss Qin and help you clear up any doubts." Qin Yining looked at his young face curiously and nodded with a smile. "So it's Mr. Xie. My apologies for not recognizing you. You flatter me." Then he reverted to his slightly hoarse voice. "Miss Qin, you should return to the camp first. When you see officials later, you don't have to say anything." Qin Yining waved his hand and said, "There's no hurry. I already know the current situation. It won't be too late for us to return after we think of a countermeasure. It won't be convenient to talk about this after we return to the camp." When Xie Yu saw Qin Yining's reaction, he asked in surprise, "Does Miss Qin have a plan?" Qin Yining said, "I do have some ideas, and I need your advice. I'd like to hear the details." Xie Yu cupped his hands. Qin Yining said, "Since Your Majesty promoted officials Wei to be the new commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army, he definitely isn't a stupid person. His secret report didn't receive any response from the Emperor, so he must be suspicious and will report again. This time, don't stop him. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.